Chapter 938. Blood Essence at the Level of an Emperor? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the head of the Gu family was shocked at first, then he quickly said, "Most of the Emperor's blood essence was left behind from the ancient times, and it's extremely rare in this era. Our Gu family only has one set. As for the big chambers of commerce in Ningzhou ancient city, there should be some left, but not many, and the price is extremely high. Even for the Gu family, the Emperor's blood essence was a treasure that could only be found by chance. The Gu family had been passed down for countless years, and they only had one set of Emperor's blood essence, which was obtained by chance. Otherwise, they might not even have one set. Head of the Gu family, go and buy the Emperor's blood essence from all the chambers of commerce in Ningzhou ancient city. The price is not a problem. As long as they're willing to sell, buy them all." Chu Fengmian frowned. It seemed that the Emperor's blood essence was indeed extremely rare, and it was difficult to find a few sets in the entire Ningzhou ancient city. With the growth of the divine tree, 1 or 2 sets of Emperor's blood essence would not help the divine tree much. It would need at least 10 or even dozens of sets of Emperor's blood essence to make the divine tree grow again. However, even a mosquito's leg was meat. Since there was one, Chu Fengmian would not let it go. Chu Fengmian's mind moved, and a mountain of spirit stones appeared in front of him. What he lacked the least was wealth. Chu Fengmian could not even be bothered to calculate the price of these spiritual stones. He directly handed over all the spiritual stones that Chu Fengmian had condensed recently to the head of the Gu clan. Yes. The head of the Gu family had seen Chu Fengmian's shocking wealth before, and now that he saw Chu Fengmian's mountain of emperor-grade spirit stones, he was simply dumbfounded. All the chambers of commerce in Ningzhou ancient city might not even be able to match this amount of wealth. The head of the Gu family hurriedly put away all the spirit stones and left in a flash. "It seems that if I want to buy the Emperor's blood essence, I'll have to go to a more prosperous city. However, the 9 Regions Genius Tournament is about to begin, so I don't have time to go to other places." Chu Fengmian sat on a chair, quietly drinking tea while thinking about what he would do next. The 9 Regions Genius Tournament would begin in 4 days, and Chu Fengmian did not have the energy to go to other places. This time, the 9 Regions Genius Tournament was unusual. Even someone like the Demon Emperor was planning to participate. Chu Fengmian also wanted to see what was different about this 9-region genius battle. "Young master, are you planning to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament?" Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Gu Jin, who was serving Chu Fengmian, suddenly spoke. "Gu Jin also wishes to accompany young master." "Oh? You also want to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament?" Chu Fengmian glanced at Gu Jin and smiled. "Of course you can. With your current strength, as long as you don't encounter any monstrous geniuses in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, you won't be in any danger. Besides, you've just made a breakthrough, so you should participate in some battles to consolidate your cultivation." "Thank you, young master." Gu Jin, who was at the side, repeatedly expressed his gratitude. While the two of them were talking, a crack suddenly appeared in the space of the palace. A figure came out from inside. It was the head of the Gu family. The head of the Gu clan held a few jade boxes in his hand and walked out of the spatial realm. The various chambers of commerce in Ningzhou ancient city have a total of 6 portions of Emperor blood essence. Including the Gu family's portion, there are 7 portions in total. Please take a look, young master. The head of the Gu family handed over the 7 jade boxes and said respectfully. Chu Fengmian waved his hand, and the 7 jade boxes were opened one by one. Balls of Emperor blood essence lay quietly inside. Many of these Emperor blood essences had been passed down from the ancient times. Tens of thousands of years had passed, but the power of the mask hadn't diminished. Moreover, there wasn't any smell of blood, only a faint fragrance. If there were no accidents, an Emperor blood essence could live for tens of thousands of years. Some powerful emperors could even live for tens of thousands of years. Their blood essence wouldn't be depleted even after tens of thousands of years. Only after 50,000 years, or even 100,000 years, would the spiritual power of the mask gradually dissipate. The spiritual power of these blood essences was at least 90% of its spiritual power. It was already considered good. Very good. Chu Fengmian sized it up and nodded with satisfaction. A vortex suddenly condensed in Chu Fengmian's palm and devoured the 7 portions of Emperor blood essences into the divine tree. After devouring 7 portions of Emperor blood essences in one go, even the divine tree couldn't devour them in one go. It could only slowly refine them. At least for half a month, the divine tree wouldn't need to devour the Emperor blood essences anymore. Let's refine them slowly. I wonder if this divine tree can really grow to be as powerful as the one in the desolate ancient sect. Chu Fengmian looked at the divine tree devouring the Emperor blood essences without any joy. He thought of the divine tree in the desolate ancient sect. It was so powerful and terrifying. If one day the body in Chu Fengmian's body could also reach such a level, he would really be invincible. Even so, even if this divine tree was young, it still had great benefits for Chu Fengmian. Is there no Emperor blood essence of a demon god in Ningzhou ancient city? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked. A demon god's blood essence contained more power than an Emperor blood essence. In terms of bloodline power, how could a martial artist compare to a demon god? Since the divine tree could devour the Emperor blood essence, Chu Fengmian also wanted to see if it could devour the Emperor blood essence of a demon god. If it could, at least 1 portion of a demon god's blood essence would be more useful than 10 portions of Emperor blood essence. An Emperor blood essence of a demon god? This is something that only exists in legend. Our Ningzhou ancient city hasn't had an Emperor blood essence of a demon god for at least 10,000 years. The patriarch of the Gu family explained. Even these Emperor blood essences were accumulated over thousands of years. As for an Emperor blood essence of a demon god, I've never seen one in my life. It seemed that the Emperor blood essence of a demon god was countless times more difficult to find than an Emperor blood essence. Hearing the patriarch of the Gu family's words, Chu Fengmian understood. There weren't many demon gods in the 9 regions, let alone an Emperor blood essence of a demon god. It was said that most of the demon gods had gathered together. It wouldn't be easy to kill them and seize their blood essences. Therefore, even if there were some high-grade demon god blood essences, they were passed down from ancient times. Chapter 939. The only place where one can buy the blood essence of a demon god at the emperor level should be the city of 1,000 merchants. The Gu clan leader suddenly thought of something and said, "It's said that there are auctions in the city of 1,000 merchants that sell emperor-level monster god blood essence." The city of 1,000 merchants. Chu Fengmian wasn't unfamiliar with this name. In terms of the most flourishing city in the 9 regions, it was surely the city of 1,000 merchants, and there was no suspense. Countless chambers of commerce in the 9 regions were based in the city of 1,000 merchants. Indeed, the only place where one could buy emperor-level monster god blood essence was the city of 1,000 merchants. The city of 1,000 merchants was in the opposite direction from the ancient gladiator arena. He could only participate in the 9 regions genius tournament before going to the city of 1,000 merchants. Chu Fengmian already had a plan. The most important thing was to participate in the 9 regions genius tournament. Chu Fengmian came to the domain for the 9 regions genius tournament. It's time to set off. Chu Fengmian finished his tea and slowly stood up. I'm going to the ancient gladiator arena. I need to borrow the teleportation formation in the ancient city of Ning province. No problem. The young master asked me to follow. The Gu clan leader led the way and Chu Fengmian quickly arrived in front of a teleportation formation. The ancient city of Ning province wasn't huge in the domain, but it was an ancient city. That was why there were teleportation formations that led to various cities. "Father, I also want to follow the young master to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Gu Jin said to the head of the Gu family from the side. Jin, you want to go too? The Gu clan leader was slightly surprised and then asked. Alright. With your current strength, it's indeed time for you to go out and gain experience. If you encounter any danger, you can tell me through the Jade Talisman. Chu Fengmian condensed a jade talisman from his palm and handed it to the Gu clan leader. Since he wanted the Gu clan leader to work for him, he naturally had to give him some benefit. Moreover, this jade talisman could be used to monitor the Gu clan leader at any time to see if he was disloyal. You can use the rest of the wealth to manage. I need a large amount of Emperor-level blood essence. You can help me collect it. I'll come back after the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. After saying all this, Chu Fengmian slowly stood up and stepped into the teleportation array. Gu Jin followed behind Chu Fengmian and stepped into the teleportation portal. Yes, young master. I will manage it well and wait for young master's return. The head of the Gu clan said respectfully as he opened the teleportation portal. Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin disappeared from the ancient city of Ning Province. From the teleportation array, he began to cross over continuously. Before long, Chu Fengmian felt dizzy. In front of him was a completely unfamiliar city. Young master, we're here. This is the ancient battle arena. Gu Jin said. Speaking of Chu Fengmian, it wasn't her first time here. Although she hadn't participated in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, she had watched it many times. Such a grand event was enough to attract countless cultivators from all over the 9 regions. Thus, Gu Jinchi and Chu Fengmian were much more familiar with it. Chu Fengmian brought Gu Jin here because he considered Gu Jin's familiarity with the region, which was why he brought her here. It was much more convenient for Chu Fengmian to bring Gu Jin along by himself. However, the ancient gladiator arena was different from what Chu Fengmian had imagined. In his imagination, the ancient gladiator arena should be an extremely desolate place. However, at a glance, this place should be in the land of a city that was several times larger than Ning Province's ancient city. Countless cultivators were walking through the city. It was a hubbub of voices. It was definitely more prosperous than the ancient city of desolation. Even many of the martial artists on the road could be considered as geniuses in their own right. Now that the 9 Regions Genius Tournament had begun, it was enough to attract countless geniuses from all over the 9 regions. There were geniuses everywhere. Even Chu Fengmian couldn't help but be surprised. Gu Jin calmly explained when she saw the surprise in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Young master, this isn't the ancient battle arena. It's the martial imperial city. The ancient battle arena only opens the day before the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Cultivators only need to go through the teleportation array in the martial imperial city to enter. We're a few days early. We can find an inn to rest and recover our energy before participating in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Now that we're here early, there should be some rooms available. If we wait another day, we might not be able to find any. Chu Fengmian nodded after hearing Gu Jin's words. 4 days was a short period of time for a cultivator at Chu Fengmian's level. However, it would be too embarrassing to sleep on the street. Let's find an inn first. Chu Fengmian looked at the martial imperial city. It was his first time coming to the martial imperial city. Originally, Chu Fengmian wanted to walk around. However, after hearing Gu Jin's words, he decided to find an inn first. Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin slowly walked around the martial imperial city. Suddenly, they saw a huge pavilion in front of them. It was dozens of floors high. It towered into the sky and had an extraordinary aura. The words Sky-Reaching Pavilion were engraved on its surface. Sky-Reaching Pavilion. Chu Fengmian remembered that Sky-Reaching Pavilion was the property of Sky-Reaching Pavilion. Sky-Reaching Pavilion could be considered one of the biggest chambers of commerce in the entire 9 regions. As for the Sky Tower, it was an inn owned by the Sky Tower. It was said that the Sky Tower was not only a place to cultivate, it was also a place where one could buy and sell spirit medicines, spirit weapons, information, and even live humans. Of course, one had to pay a sufficient amount of wealth. Sky-reaching pavilion was extremely expensive. One had to be at least a life and death realm cultivator to afford it. Otherwise, ordinary cultivators wouldn't even be able to afford it for a day. The price for a day's stay would be at least several king-grade spirit stones, or even higher. However, Chu Fengmian didn't care about wealth at all. Let's go. We'll stay in Sky-reaching pavilion. Chu Fengmian stepped into Sky-reaching pavilion. Seeing Chu Fengmian enter, several women immediately came to welcome him. These women were all saints in the divine force realm. In some small sects they could be considered experts. If they were in a remote place like Wu Xing Nation, they could even establish their own sect. Chapter 940. Most of the martial artists who could stay in Sky-reaching pavilion were life and death experts. Therefore, the people serving them couldn't be too weak. Seeing Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin walk in, these women hurriedly welcomed them. These women's strength was ordinary, but their appearances were top-notch. Although they couldn't compare to Gu Jin, they were still pleasing to the eyes. Seniors, are you here to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Battle? A young woman took the initiative to speak. The 9 Regions Genius Battle will start in 4 days. Our Sky-reaching pavilion's rooms have arrays that connect to the underground spirit veins. They're rich in spirit energy and can be used for your cultivation. Chu Fengmian nodded after hearing the woman's words. Give me 2 heaven-grade rooms. Chu Fengmian had stayed in Sky-reaching pavilion in his previous life. Sky-reaching pavilion's rooms were divided into heaven, earth, profound, and yellow grades. Although the lowest grade yellow grade rooms were much better than the other inns, Chu Fengmian didn't lack wealth and naturally wanted to enjoy the best. Moreover, Sky-reaching pavilion's rooms had special arrays that could purify spirit energy. The higher the grade of the room, the better the effect of cultivation. Senior, are you planning to stay in a heaven-grade room? The woman was a little surprised, but she quickly reacted. We still have 2 heaven-rank rooms left in the Sky-reaching pavilion. However, it costs 5 royal-grade spirit stones a day to use a heaven-rank room. The price of a heaven-tier room was 5 royal-tier spirit stones a day. Even the old ancestors would not be able to afford it. It could be said that those who could afford a heaven-grade room were either geniuses of the 7 great sects or emperors. Otherwise, they couldn't afford such a price. However, to Chu Fengmian, this amount of spirit stones was simply a drop in the ocean. Chu Fengmian's mind moved, condensing 40 emperor-grade spirit stones in front of him and flying them out. 2 heaven-grade rooms. Yes, I'll arrange it. The woman received the 40 emperor-grade spirit stones and hurriedly went to arrange it. Before leaving, she couldn't help but look at Chu Fengmian a few more times. She was secretly thinking about how to get closer to Chu Fengmian and curry favor with him. Those who could afford a heaven-grade room in Sky-reaching pavilion were definitely famous figures in the region. Even the slightest bit of benefit would be more than what these saints had accumulated in their entire lives. Chu Fengmian didn't think much of it when he saw what she was thinking. These people didn't have high aptitudes, and they had chosen to come to Sky-piercing Tower for the sake of wealth. If they met some experts, they would take them back to marry and take them as concubines. It would be their good fortune. Chu Fengmian didn't have such thoughts. Although these women were good-looking, they still couldn't enter Chu Fengmian's eyes. As long as she worked obediently, Chu Fengmian could reward her with some wealth. Senior, it's done. Please follow me. The woman quickly returned with 2 jade talismans in her hands. The word heaven was engraved on each of the jade talismans. It seemed to be the spirit talisman of this heavenly tower. Chu Fengmian had just stood up. 5 martial artists, 3 men and 2 women, suddenly walked in from outside Clear Sky Tower. The auras of these 5 warriors were extremely terrifying. The weakest of them was at the 5th step of the life and death steps, the divine martial realm. The remaining 4 were all at the 6th step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm. Moreover, the aura of each of them was much stronger than that of other martial artists at the same level. The arrival of this group of people attracted the attention of all the martial artists in Clear Sky Tower. Humph, this group of trash overestimated themselves. They all came to participate in the 9 regions genius battle. The martial imperial city is going to be crowded to death. One of the men walked up to Heavenly Tower. When he saw that the hall was filled with people, he spoke with dissatisfaction. His words caused many cultivators in the hall to show anger on their faces. The martial artists who dared to participate in the 9 regions genius battle were all famous geniuses. Who didn't have some pride? However, when these warriors saw the martial god's statue on the back of the man's clothes, the anger in their hearts was forcefully suppressed. Wearing the martial god statue, he was a disciple of the sage monarch sect. Even if they were arrogant, they didn't dare to compete with the disciples of the 7 great sections. They hurriedly looked away, not daring to look again. Humph, a group of trash. The man from the sage monarch sect saw the reaction of the surrounding martial artists, and the arrogance on his face became thicker. He proudly pointed at the receptionist. "What are you doing? Hurry up and find 2 heaven-grade rooms." "Seniors, the heaven-grade rooms are full." A receptionist hurriedly walked over and cautiously asked, "What? They're full?" The man from the sage monarch sect showed some dissatisfaction. "It seems that there are no more rooms. Let's go to another place," a female disciple from the sage monarch sect said. "Another place?" The man from the sage monarch sect's eyes flashed as he looked around the hall. Suddenly, his gaze fell on Chu Fengmian. He didn't look at Chu Fengmian, but at the 2 jade talismans in the hands of the receptionist beside Chu Fengmian. "Wait here. I'll go back," the man from the sage monarch sect said as he walked towards Chu Fengmian. In a few steps, he arrived in front of Chu Fengmian. "Boy, are these 2 heaven-grade rooms yours? Hand them over." The man from the sage monarch sect looked at Chu Fengmian. When he saw that Chu Fengmian was in the divine martial realm, his eyes were filled with disdain. "You can go to another room." His words were extremely overbearing, as if he was giving an order to Chu Fengmian. "Oh no. This boy is being targeted by the sage monarch sect. The people from the sage monarch sect are all arrogant. Looks like this boy is going to suffer. But this guy can afford to stay in a heaven-grade room. He should be someone with some status. So what? Even if he has some status, he can't compete with the 7 major sections." The martial artists looked at Chu Fengmian and started to discuss. Hearing the discussion, the man from the sage monarch sect looked even more proud. However, when he saw that Chu Fengmian didn't reply, his eyes turned cold. "Boy, I'm talking to you. Can't you hear me? Oh right, here's a royal grade spirit stone. Quickly give up your room. Here's a royal grade spirit stone as compensation. Get out of my sight." The man from the sage monarch sect suddenly took out a royal grade spirit stone and threw it at Chu Fengmian as if he was giving alms. A royal grade spirit stone couldn't even afford to stay in a heaven grade room. Chapter 941. Get lost. Chu Fengmian looked at the man from the Saint King sect and his eyes flashed. He waved his hand and the royal grade spiritual stone was smashed into smithereens. It seemed that Chu Fengmian could not live in peace. More and more people were courting death. "Boy, how dare you break my spiritual stone?" Seeing that Chu Fengmian did not take the spiritual stone and instead smashed it, the man from the Holy King sect was furious. "It seems that you don't know who we are. Let me tell you, boy, we are from the Holy King sect. We are here on behalf of the Holy King sect. Why? Do you want to be our enemy?" The man from the Holy King sect looked at Chu Fengmian and said arrogantly, "Kneel down now and hand over the 2 heaven-level rooms. Then we will forgive your sins. Otherwise, no matter who you are, you will be hunted down by the Holy King sect." "Senior." The girl standing beside Chu Fengmian trembled when she heard the man from the Holy King sect. The Holy King sect was a colossus that she could not afford to offend. She was in a dilemma. Hunted down by the Holy King sect? You are just a disciple of the Holy King sect. Who do you think you are? How dare you be so presumptuous in front of me? Are you going to get lost, or do you want me to throw you out? Chu Fengmian laughed when he saw the man's threat. It seemed that among the 7 sects, the Sage Monarch sect was the most arrogant. In the eastern region, the Sage Monarch sect was the absolute ruler. That was why all the disciples of the Sage Monarch sect were so arrogant. Chu Fengmian could not care less about the arrogance of the Holy King sect disciples. However, if they dared to be arrogant in front of him, they were courting death. What? You want me to get lost? Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the man from the Holy King sect laughed crazily as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Boy, who do you think you are? How dare you speak so arrogantly? It seems that I, Wu Kuang, have been in the eastern region for too long. How dare you challenge me? Wu Kuang! He is the disciple of a grand elder of the Holy King sect. He used to be the top of the list of top 100 talents in the eastern region. It's that fierce man. Hearing the name Wu Kuang, some martial artists realized the identity of the man in front of them. Wu Kuang? Number 1 on the list of top 100 talents in the eastern region? I've never heard of it. I'll give you 3 more seconds to scram. Chu Fengmian said coldly. Fine, fine. Brat, you're courting death, so don't blame me. Scram. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Wu Kuang could no longer hold himself back and suddenly attacked. From his body, spiritual power rose crazily, and martial arts condensed in his body. Suddenly, he grabbed at Chu Fengmian. It went straight for Chu Fengmian's chest. The power contained in this claw was extremely vicious. If anyone was caught by this claw, even if they didn't die, they would be seriously injured. His first move was so ruthless. How ruthless! This brat is going to suffer. If he had known earlier, he would have handed over the room obediently. Many surrounding warriors sighed and shook their heads as they looked at Chu Fengmian. The 9 zones had always revered martial arts, and the only thing that mattered was strength. Die, brat! Wu Kuang's face was ferocious. As he roared, his claw was already close to Chu Fengmian's chest. But the moment his claw was close to Chu Fengmian's chest, it suddenly stopped, unable to move forward. Chu Fengmian suddenly attacked and grabbed Wu Kuang's wrist tightly, making it impossible for Wu Kuang's hand to move. What? Wu Kuang was stopped. Seeing Wu Kuang's hand being held by Chu Fengmian, the surrounding warriors were in disbelief, their eyes wide open. They had all heard of Wu Kuang's strength. He was ranked first on the list of top 100 talents in the eastern region. Among the geniuses of the 7 sects, he was considered a top figure. In their opinion, with Wu Kuang's attack, even if Chu Fengmian didn't die, he would be seriously injured. As for Chu Fengmian being able to withstand it, it was not within their expectations. The other Sage King sect disciples looked at Chu Fengmian with slight surprise. They didn't expect this either. After being arrogant for so long, is this all you've got? Since you won't scram, I'll make you scram. Chu Fengmian sneered, and his hand suddenly tightened. Wu Kuang's body was suddenly lifted up and thrown out of the sky connecting tower. Boom! Outside Sky Reaching Tower, there were still many warriors watching the show, but suddenly they all hurriedly dispersed. Wu Kuang's body was thrown out of Sky Reaching Tower, and he took a few steps back before stabilizing himself. What's going on? What happened? Someone was thrown out of Sky Reaching Tower? In Martial Imperial City, many warriors saw the commotion and gathered around to watch the show. This is Wu Kuang? Wu Kuang was thrown out? Some of the more knowledgeable warriors recognized Wu Kuang at a glance, and their eyes were filled with surprise. As a genius of the 7 sects, Wu Kuang was actually thrown out. Although this was not enough to hurt Wu Kuang's nerves and bones, These discussions caused his expression to turn ugly. As a genius of the seven sects, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? Damn it. Kid, looks like I've underestimated you. Wu Kuang looked at Chu Fengmian with a ferocious expression, and his eyes were filled with endless killing intent. He was extremely angry. Boom. Behind Wu Kuang, the shadow of a martial god slowly condensed, and then the martial god's shadow merged with Wu Kuang's body. It looked as if he was the martial god himself. Spiritual power burst forth from his body, forcing the surrounding crowd to disperse. Stop, no fighting in sky-reaching tower. At this moment, a few figures suddenly appeared, and they were the stewards of sky-reaching tower. They felt the fluctuation of sky-reaching tower's spiritual energy and rushed over, wanting to stop the fight. Get out of my way, a bunch of trash. How dare you stop me? Wu Kuang glanced at the stewards of sky-piercing tower. Suddenly, his spiritual energy erupted, and he sent a palm strike towards them. Slap. The stewards of sky-connecting tower were all patriarchs in the heart-tempering realm. However, their auras were far inferior to Wu Kuang's. Chapter 942. The steward of sky-reaching tower was sent flying by the slap. His expression was ugly. The strength of these stewards was far from comparable to a true expert. Generally speaking, as long as one revealed their identity, most martial artists would show some respect to sky-reaching tower. However, Wu Kuang did not care and sent the steward flying with a slap. This slap caused the other stewards of the Heavenspan Pavilion to retreat one after another. Wu Kuang was a genius with an extremely high status in the Sage Monarch sect. How could he endure such humiliation? He did not even care about sky-reaching tower. What should we do? We can't stop Wu Kuang. Quickly report this to the great venerables. The stewards hurriedly began to discuss. No matter what, this was a conflict in sky-reaching tower. They had to be responsible for it. Brat, you have completely enraged me. No matter who you are or what your identity is, you must die today. Kneel down and accept your death. Wu Kuang took a step forward and his aura surged crazily. This aura was completely different from before. The martial god's shadow condensed behind his back and merged with his body. Martial God True Body. This is the secret technique of the Sage Monarch sect. Martial God True Body. Gu Jin, who was standing beside Chu Fengmian, quickly reminded him. The martial god True Body was the secret technique of the Sage Monarch sect. Now that Wu Kuang had used it without any hesitation, it was enough to show how angry he was. He was willing to sacrifice everything to kill Chu Fengmian. The martial artists standing in the lobby of sky-reaching tower retreated. They knew how terrifying the martial god True Body was. Anyone who was affected by it would lose a layer of skin even if they did not die. Invincible. Wu Kuang took a step forward and rushed in front of Chu Fengmian. Suddenly, he threw a punch. A terrifying force swept through the entire lobby of sky-reaching tower, trying to engulf everyone. Chu Fengmian stood in place and watched Wu Kuang's punch coming. He did not even move. He had no intention of dodging. What is this brat trying to do? He's not dodging? Is he crazy? Seeing Chu Fengmian's actions, the surrounding warriors didn't understand what Chu Fengmian was trying to do. If he didn't block such a terrifying punch, it would be no different from courting death. But in the next moment, countless warriors' eyes were filled with shock. Chu Fengmian slowly moved when the fist was about to hit him. He also clenched his fist and punched out. Meet force with force. He chose to fight with the Sage Monarch sect disciples. The most powerful thing about the disciples of the Holy King sect was their physical strength. The true body of the martial god had merged with the supreme martial path to create an extremely powerful body. This was the true essence of the martial god True Body. But now, Chu Fengmian actually chose to take it head-on. Invincible in the world. What a boastful claim. Chu Fengmian let out a hearty laugh as he threw out a punch. Two fist winds suddenly collided in the air. These fist winds caused many of the surrounding warriors to be sent flying. Even some of the patriarchs wouldn't be able to withstand the shockwaves from the collision, let alone the heart of the collision. Who's the winner? All eyes were on the heart of the collision. They were all looking forward to the result of the collision. In the next moment, a figure flew out from the heart of the collision. This figure wasn't Chu Fengmian, but Wu Kuang. Wu Kuang flew out and crashed into a wall. Only then did his body stop. The crowd noticed that Wu Kuang's body was filled with countless tiny cracks. Although these cracks were small, they couldn't escape the eyes of the warriors. The true body of the martial god has been shattered. Wu Kuang's true body of the martial god has been shattered by a single punch. Oh my god! What kind of power is this? The true body of the martial god of the Holy King sect disciples was as tough as a spiritual weapon. Wu Kuang was a genius among the Holy King sect disciples. His body was almost as tough as a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. But now, a single punch from Chu Fengmian had caused his true body of the martial god to crack. A single punch was enough to shatter a heaven-grade spiritual weapon. What kind of power was this? This was a power that only an emperor could possess. Wu Kuang. The remaining 4 Holy King sect disciples hurried over. When they saw Wu Kuang's shattered true body of the martial god, their faces darkened. The true body of the Holy King sect's true body of the Holy King sect could be said to be the foundation of their strength. It was also their trump card. Once it was shattered, they would have to pay a hefty price to recover it. Your Excellency, you've gone too far. One of the Holy King sect disciples looked at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. Too far? If it weren't for Heavenspan Tower's face, I would have killed him already. Chu Fengmian laughed and pointed at the disciples of the Sage Monarch sect. Get lost. If you don't, you'll end up like trash. You! Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the Holy King sect disciples' faces turned green and red. They were the Holy King sect disciples and had never been scolded like this before. It was a great humiliation indeed. The disciples of the Sage Monarch sect, no matter where they were in the 9 zones, were respected. Being pointed at and scolded like this was something that had never happened before. When the Sage Monarch sect disciples heard Chu Fengmian's words, they could not wait to rush over and fight him to the death. But no one dared to. Wu Kuang had been defeated by Chu Fengmian in a single move. Their strength was on par with Wu Kuang's at best. Fighting with Chu Fengmian was no different from courting death. Good. We'll remember your words today. When the 9 regions genius battle comes, you'll die. A Holy King sect disciple shouted at Chu Fengmian. Finally, he turned his head and said reluctantly, Let's go. The Sage King sect disciples did not even look back as they left. Ridiculous. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a disdainful smile. The last words of the Sage Monarch sect disciples were just trying to save face. In Chu Fengmian's eyes, these guys were like ants. The outcome of the 9 regions genius battle would be the same in a few days. These Holy King sect disciples were nothing in Chu Fengmian's eyes. If not for the fact that they were in Sky-Reaching Tower, which was a sensitive place, their every move would be monitored by countless people. Chapter 943. Where did this ferocious man come from? Wu Kuang was actually unable to fight back against him. Seeing Chu Fengmian and the people from the Holy King sect leave, the martial artists of Sky-Reaching Tower were finally relieved. During the conflict, they could only tremble in fear. It was only after everyone had left that they could finally catch their breath. Wu Kuang's strength isn't the best in this year's competition, but he's still a top figure. If he's lucky, he might even enter the top 100. I didn't expect him to lose so badly. And this person is only in the divine martial realm. He's 1 level lower than Wu Kuang, but he's so strong. There was a huge gap between each level of the life and death step. Many of the geniuses from the 7 major sects could only cross 1 level. The disciples of the 7 major sects were all geniuses. They were invincible in the same level. Chu Fengmian was only in the divine martial realm, but he could easily defeat Wu Kuang. This was what surprised everyone the most. Could it be that this person is hiding his level? With this strength, he's at least an ancestor in the heart-refining realm, or an emperor who's deliberately hiding his level. One of the martial artists speculated, disagreeing with Lin Fan's words. As soon as he finished speaking, a martial artist next to him said disdainfully, "How is that possible? If he's an emperor, how could Wu Kuang be so arrogant? In my opinion, this person isn't from the domain, but a hidden genius from the other domains. The 9 domains are so big that any kind of genius can be born. Let's wait and see. When the martial competition begins, this person will definitely stand out." After a long discussion, the group of martial artists gradually dispersed. Today's matter became a topic of conversation, and it gradually spread from the martial imperial city. Mysterious geniuses were always enough to attract people's attention. On the other side, Chu Fengmian didn't know that his matter had caused a commotion. He and Luo Shi followed the woman all the way to the interior of Sky Reaching Tower. From the outside, Sky Reaching Tower looked like it was only a few dozen stories high, but inside there was another world. The interior of Heavenly Tower was simply divided into small worlds. Each room was an independent space. Even an emperor couldn't pry into it. Soon, the two of them arrived at the deepest part of the Heavenly Connecting Tower, arriving at a space. This room was basically a courtyard. It was an extremely large courtyard. There were mountains, rivers, and even an orchard. "Seniors, you can rest as much as you want. When the 9 regions genius battle is about to begin, I'll call you too," the woman said respectfully. "If you want to buy spiritual herbs or information, feel free to call me over." "You've done well." Chu Fengmian nodded. With a thought, a royal-grade spirit stone appeared in his hand, and he tossed it to the woman. "Thank you, senior." The woman was excited. She took the royal-grade spirit stone and quickly expressed her gratitude. The royal spiritual emperor's worth a fortune, and it was worth it. Chu Fengmian had never been a stingy person. Chu Fengmian was very satisfied that the woman had not said anything when she had been threatened by Wu Kuang. After sending the woman away, Chu Fengmian stepped into the courtyard. Gu Jin, on the other hand, began to cultivate in another courtyard beside Chu Fengmian. Gu Jin had just made a breakthrough. These few days were enough for her to consolidate her cultivation and prepare for the 9 regions genius battle. As for Chu Fengmian, he didn't need to prepare. Although he had just made a move, Chu Fengmian had the divine pulse. He could recover to his peak state at any moment. He didn't need to prepare for a few days in advance. The rooms in Sky Reaching Tower are really luxurious. The spiritual energy here is as rich as the 7 great sects' holy lands. Chu Fengmian sat on a stone bench in the courtyard, looking at a pond beside him. The pond wasn't water, but water condensed from extremely pure spiritual energy. The entire courtyard was filled with spiritual energy. For ordinary cultivators, it was enough for them to recover their spiritual energy. If they stayed in the courtyard for a long time, their cultivation speed would be much faster. Chu Fengmian also felt a trace of chaotic energy from the spiritual energy. The source of this spiritual energy was an ancient spiritual spring that contained the aura of chaos. The law of chaos was mysterious and unfathomable. Countless emperors and even supreme ancestors tried to comprehend it. It was said that everything in the world was born from chaotic energy. The primal chaos represented the origin of everything. Whoever could comprehend the primal chaos, regardless of whether it was martial skills or control of spiritual power, would increase exponentially. He didn't expect Sky Reaching Tower to be so generous as to own an ancient spiritual spring that contained chaotic energy. Chu Fengmian slowly absorbed the chaotic energy contained in the spiritual energy. His body relaxed a lot, and even his mind became very clear. Under the stimulation of the chaotic energy, the 9 regions sword technique in Chu Fengmian's mind began to change. It began to change in a more perfect direction. Chu Fengmian sat on the stone bench and slowly closed his eyes. An ancient book condensed in front of him. The words 9 regions appeared in this ancient book. This ancient book was the condensation of Chu Fengmian's 9 regions sword technique. When the ancient book was opened, one could see the countless sword techniques that Chu Fengmian had integrated into it. Many of these sword techniques were enough to make a sword sect like the Tianjian sect go crazy. Now, they were all integrated into the 9 regions sword technique. I thought that the 9 regions sword technique had begun to reach perfection, but now it seems that it's still full of holes and loopholes. It seems that it's easier said than done to create a perfect sword technique. Chu Fengmian observed the 9 regions sword technique and couldn't help but sigh. Chu Fengmian once thought that his 9 regions sword technique was about to reach perfection. However, this time, as Chu Fengmian's strength increased, he looked at the 9 regions sword technique again and found that it still had many shortcomings. As his strength increased, Chu Fengmian's vision became wider and wider. Naturally, he could see many shortcomings of the 9 regions sword technique. This was something that Chu Fengmian couldn't see before. However, this was a good thing. Only by constantly seeing the shortcomings could Chu Fengmian perfect the 9 regions sword technique and make it more and more perfect. Chu Fengmian condensed his spiritual energy and slowly made up for the shortcomings of the 9 regions sword technique. In his eyes, a figure was constantly performing countless sword techniques and practicing them. Chapter 944. Chu Fengmian slowly opened his eyes, and there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. At the end of the phone, the chaotic aura in this courtyard was actually quite dense. It was enough for some ancestors or even emperors to practice martial arts and comprehend the laws. However, for a glutton like Chu Fengmian, the 9 realms swordsmanship that he wanted to practice was too complicated. How complicated was the 9 realms swordsmanship that fused with countless swordsmanship in the world? It could be said that there was no swordsmanship, martial arts, or technique in the entire 9 realms that was comparable to his. The chaotic aura in this courtyard was not even enough to support 1% of Chu Fengmian's practice of the 9 realms swordsmanship. It was exhausted. It would take at least a few days for the chaotic aura to fill the courtyard. Chu Fengmian could not afford to wait. I originally wanted to use this chaotic aura to practice the 9 realms swordsmanship to make up for my shortcomings. Chu Fengmian was a little helpless. An ancient spirit spring with chaotic aura was extremely rare in the entire 9 realms. Chu Fengmian had obtained countless treasures, but he had never found one. It could only be considered a pleasant surprise to encounter one in Sky-Reaching Tower, but it was still not enough. However, Chu Fengmian would not be willing to give up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The direction of this spiritual power seems to be traceable. Chu Fengmian gradually sensed where the spiritual power came from, even though it was hidden. Although it was hidden, it still could not be hidden from Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense. Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense moved and gradually felt the direction of the spiritual power. Following the direction of the spiritual power, Chu Fengmian might find the spirit spring of Sky-Reaching Tower. Let's go and explore first. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he made a decision. Such an opportunity was once in a lifetime. Even though there were many experts in Sky-Reaching Tower, Chu Fengmian was very careful. Not everyone was able to find his traces. Chu Fengmian quietly condensed a sword intent and turned it into a small godly devouring python. Following Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense, it directly drilled into a restriction. This restriction was the passage that connected the courtyard to the spirit spring. Although it was not hidden, it was still detected by Chu Fengmian. His godly devouring python carefully and slowly drilled into the restriction. He did not know how long he had been walking. Suddenly, some gray fog appeared in front of them. What a powerful restriction! Chu Fengmian observed a restriction that suddenly appeared in front of him. The restriction was still very new. It appeared that it had been set up for less than 10 years. The power contained within the mask was extremely terrifying. It was stronger than any power Chu Fengmian had ever seen. What a big deal! This restriction is set up by at least 5 old ancestors who are in the immortal realm. Chu Fengmian carefully observed for a moment and then gasped in shock. The forbidding aura was set up by 5 progenitors of the supreme realm. Ancestor Wu was the absolute pinnacle even among the 7 sects. A force that could take out 5 supreme ancestors was definitely not inferior to the 7 major sections. They actually set up such a powerful restriction. What kind of secret is this spirit spring hiding? The more powerful the restriction was, the more secretive the secret behind the restriction was. Chu Fengmian observed the divine sky-devouring python carefully. Then, he noticed that it was slowly approaching him. Then, he gradually drilled through the edge of the restriction. He penetrated through the layer of restriction without triggering it. The restriction was only to block the spiritual power. Once it sensed the spiritual power, it would be activated and burst out. Chu Fengmian's divine sky-devouring python was condensed by sword essence. Therefore, although the restriction was powerful, the divine sky-devouring python was unobstructed. Even Ancestor Wu, who had set up the restriction, did not expect that the sword essence would sneak in. However, in the entire 9 regions, except for Chu Fengmian, it was hard to say whether there was anyone else who could achieve this kind of sword essence manifestation. After all, this was a level that countless Sword Dao Grandmasters could not achieve even in their dreams. The divine sky-devouring python went through the restriction without any obstruction. This is underground? There's actually such a huge spirit spring hidden under the martial imperial city? Chu Fengmian suddenly realized that the divine sky-devouring python had followed him all the way to the underground of the martial imperial city. At the depth of thousands of meters underground, there was a huge spirit spring. My God! What a huge spirit spring this is! Chu Fengmian's consciousness merged with the divine sky-devouring python and came all the way to the underground spirit spring of the martial imperial city. When he opened his eyes, there was endless gray fog in front of him. This gray fog was none other than the color of the primal chaos. Chu Fengmian scanned the underground spirit spring with his spiritual consciousness. He could not see the end of it. It was extremely huge. The 9 regions actually have such a huge spirit spring? Chu Fengmian's expression was extremely shocked. In his previous life, he had seen countless spirit springs. Chu Fengmian had even seen the spirit springs of the 7 great sects. However, the spirit spring under the martial imperial city was much bigger than the spirit springs of the 7 great sects. This spirit spring was much bigger than all the known spirit springs in the 9 regions. Only then did Chu Fengmian realize what kind of place he had barged into. No one in the 9 regions knew this shocking secret. If the news that there was such a huge spiritual spring under the martial imperial city was spread out, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. It was enough to trigger a great war in the 9 regions. The 7 great sects could shed all pretenses and start a chaotic war. Whoever could obtain such a huge spirit spring would be able to establish a force that surpassed the 7 great sects. Chu Fengmian nervously observed every movement around him. Such a spirit spring should not be unguarded. Chu Fengmian carefully observed his surroundings. When he sensed that there was no abnormality, Chu Fengmian finally let out a sigh of relief. Chu Fengmian's divine sky-devouring python was formed by sword intent. It was extremely weak. In this spirit spring, it was almost equivalent to a drop of water in the ocean. Once it merged with the spirit spring, it would be very difficult to detect. The more Chu Fengmian used his spiritual consciousness to observe the spirit spring, the more he could feel the vastness of this spirit spring. Even his heart did not want to take this spirit spring for himself. If Chu Fengmian could take this spirit spring for himself, he could almost break through to the 9th step of the life and death steps, the immortal realm, and become an ancestor. Chapter 945. The spiritual energy contained in the spiritual spring was simply unimaginable. It was impossible to calculate how much spiritual energy there was. No matter how big the appetite of the dragon war skill was, it was enough to fill him up. Even a saint or a supreme ancestor, regardless of their status, would not be able to resist the urge to take the spiritual spring for themselves. However, Chu Fengmian was clear that the spiritual spring was not something that he could take. Not to mention the enormous size of the spiritual spring, it was impossible for Chu Fengmian to take it. The restriction on the spiritual spring was proof that someone had already discovered the spiritual spring. There were at least 5 supreme ancestors in the immortal realm guarding it. Any supreme ancestor in the immortal realm could easily kill Chu Fengmian. Not to mention 5 supreme ancestors. The idea of taking the spiritual spring could only be hidden in the bottom of Chu Fengmian's heart. When Chu Fengmian became stronger in the future, he might have a chance. At least for now, it was something that was far from possible. However, since he was already here, he naturally wouldn't come here for nothing. It was impossible for him to take away the spiritual spring directly. However, it was still possible to devour some of the chaotic aura. The spiritual spring was so huge that it would not be easy for the experts who were monitoring the spiritual spring to notice it as long as he did not make too much noise. The chaotic aura was just enough to help Chu Fengmian practice his swordsmanship. The sky-devouring divine python slowly opened its mouth and devoured the spiritual energy of the spiritual spring. On the other side, Chu Fengmian sat in the courtyard. He could feel that a steady stream of spiritual energy had begun to enter his body. The chaotic aura made Chu Fengmian feel refreshed. He observed the 9 regions' swordsmanship again and found several shortcomings. Swordsmanship practice. 9 figures condensed in front of Chu Fengmian. These 9 figures were practicing the 9 regions' swordsmanship over and over again. There would be a slight difference in each practice. Gradually, it began to be perfected and made up for each of its shortcomings. Boom! Boom! Gusts of wind constantly blew in the courtyard. This was the fluctuation of spiritual energy that appeared when Chu Fengmian was practicing his swordsmanship. The cracks on the ancient book in front of Chu Fengmian began to be repaired. This represented the continuous improvement of the 9 regions' swordsmanship. This was a chaotic aura that could be used to practice swordsmanship. The chaotic aura was extremely rare. It could only be found in some spiritual springs. This time, Chu Fengmian found the chaotic aura by accident. In this case, Chu Fengmian would not be polite. The sky-devouring divine python was paying attention to the experts in the underground spiritual spring to prevent those experts from discovering it. As long as Chu Fengmian had enough primal chaos aura, his 9 regions swordsmanship would reach perfection temporarily and reach the limit of his current realm. After a full day, in the courtyard, the 9 figures to Chu Fengmian divine python, Chu Fengmian. They couldn't sense any powerful sword domain from Chu Fengmian's body, but when they looked at Chu Fengmian's eyes, just his gaze alone was extremely sharp. His sword will was completely hidden, making it impossible for Chu Fengmian to sense any sword will. It was even impossible to recognize Chu Fengmian's identity as a swordsman. This was the state in which the 9 realms sword art was beginning to converge. As the 9 realms sword art continued to be perfected, his sword intent also gradually converged. Such a 9 realms sword technique was even more terrifying. If Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship were to suddenly erupt, the 9 realms sword technique would be even more terrifying. Not to mention an emperor, even if a half-step supreme great ancestor came, it would be extremely troublesome. There are still 3 days until the 9 regions genius battle. Since I've already finished practicing the 9 regions sword technique, I might as well use this time to take a closer look at the spirit spring and see what's inside. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he thought to himself. Chu Fengmian's consciousness entered the heaven-devouring divine python's territory once again after dispersing the ancient book of the 9 regions sword technique. Gradually, they sneaked into the spirit spring. The primal chaos chi that Chu Fengmian devoured was nothing compared to the primal chaos chi in the spirit spring. As far as the eye could see, the entire spirit spring was still in chaos. Chu Fengmian pushed his spiritual sense to the extreme and barely managed to peel away the chaos in front of him. He began to constantly search. I don't believe that there's no end to the spirit spring. The heaven-devouring divine python formed by Chu Fengmian's sword intent kept moving through the spirit spring. Chu Fengmian wanted to figure out just how big this spirit spring was. However, even after several hours, Chu Fengmian still hadn't found the end. It was as if this spirit spring was infinitely huge, with no end in sight. It was many times bigger than what Chu Fengmian had imagined. Another 6 hours passed. Chu Fengmian's heaven-devouring divine python had been exploring the spirit spring for 12 hours. Just as Chu Fengmian was about to give up, Chu Fengmian suddenly felt that the primal chaos chi in the surroundings seemed to have thinned out a lot. Now that the heaven-devouring divine python was close to the heart of the spirit spring, the primal chaos chi should be denser. But now it had become much thinner. Chu Fengmian also felt that the primal chaos chi seemed to be directly absorbed by a force. It seems that something is devouring the primal chaos chi? Seeing this change, Chu Fengmian suddenly became alert. In the spirit spring, Chu Fengmian hadn't found anything. Now there was finally some abnormality. How could Chu Fengmian not be excited? Is there an expert cultivating in the spirit spring? Or is there something hidden in the spirit spring? Chu Fengmian thought secretly. At the same time, the heaven-devouring divine python's speed gradually slowed down and began to hide in the spirit spring. After all, the heaven-devouring divine python was formed by sword intent. Once it really hid, even some supreme ancestors couldn't easily detect it. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's heart was already prepared to encounter an accident. Once he encountered an expert of the spirit spring, Chu Fengmian would directly disperse the heaven-devouring divine python so as not to attract trouble. Chapter 946. The divine sky-devouring python followed the flow of the chaotic aura all the way to the core of the spiritual spring. Chu Fengmian felt that this should be the heart of the spiritual spring. However, the chaotic aura that should have been gathered was completely devoured by this force. Boom! All of a sudden, the power appeared once again and sucked everything in the surroundings into it. Even the divine sky-devouring python formed by Chu Fengmian's sword will was pulled in by this force along with the surrounding spiritual energy and chaotic aura. This sudden change was simply beyond Chu Fengmian's expectation. Moreover, this force was too terrifying. The divine sky-devouring python was directly sucked into the deepest part of the spiritual spring until it suddenly hit a hard object and stopped. Chu Fengmian finally felt relieved when he felt that the divine sky-devouring python was not swallowed by this force. He had used countless methods to sneak the divine sky-devouring python into the spiritual spring. This time, Chu Fengmian was able to sneak into the spiritual spring without the surveillance of the sky-reaching tower's expert. However, it would be hard to say the next time. Chu Fengmian slowly breathed a sigh of relief and then looked around. Now, the divine sky-devouring python seemed to have been pulled into a very special area. In this humiliation, there was no spiritual energy or chaotic aura. No, it was not that there was nothing. It was just that any chaotic aura that appeared would be directly devoured by this hard object beside Chu Fengmian. What is this? Chu Fengmian looked at this hard object. It was about a meter-tall ellipsoid. Chu Fengmian could feel a trace of vitality from it. An egg? This is an egg? Chu Fengmian observed for a while. He felt that this thing was most similar to the egg of a creature. However, Chu Fengmian had never heard of any creature's egg that looked like this. This egg was entirely gray. Rather than gray, it was more accurate to say that it was the same color as chaotic aura. There was no difference between it and the surrounding chaotic aura. Chu Fengmian had read countless ancient books, but he had never heard of any creature's egg that looked like this. Moreover, this egg was still continuously devouring the chaotic aura. Chu Fengmian racked his brain, but he still could not figure out the true identity of this egg. Xing Xuan. Helpless, he could only awaken Xing Xian in his mind. Xian Xing came from outside the 9 realms, so his knowledge far surpassed Chu Fengmian's. Since Chu Fengmian didn't know about it, it was very likely that the egg came from outside the 9 realms. Chu Fengmian was no longer as unfamiliar with the world outside of the 9 realms as before. In the records of the 9 realms, the outer realm had always been a mysterious place. Most of the records about the outer realms were based on people's imaginations. It was only through Xing Xian's mouth that Chu Fengmian learned more about the outer realms. But now, Chu Fengmian clearly understood that the outer realms was an even larger world. The 9 domains were just one side of the endless world. What's going on? Xing Xian's voice sounded surprised in Chu Fengmian's mind. After following Chu Fengmian, he rarely had the chance to be awakened by Chu Fengmian. Generally speaking, even if he encountered trouble, Chu Fengmian would choose to think of a solution by himself. He had only awakened Xing Xian a few times. I found something strange. Can you help me take a look? Chu Fengmian didn't beat around the bush and said directly. With a move of his palm, a water screen condensed in front of him. The water screen showed the scene of the spirit spring. Oh? You actually found such a spirit spring? Xing Xian had already recognized Chu Fengmian as his master. Now, as long as Chu Fengmian was willing, Xing Xian could easily figure out what had just happened. But soon, his gaze focused on the strange egg. He confirmed it countless times with his eyes. Then, he couldn't help but open his mouth wide. An innate divine beast. This is an innate divine beast's egg. Xing Xian's voice was filled with surprise. An innate divine beast's egg? Even Chu Fengmian's expression was as surprised as Xing Xian's. An innate divine beast. This was an existence that was only recorded in some legendary places of the 9 realms. According to legend, when the heavens and earth were created, an innate divine beast was born from the primal chaos. They were called innate divine beasts. The current dragon clan, and even the ancient war dragon clan, had inherited some of the bloodline of the innate divine beast's ancestor, Tianlong. Some of the powerful demonic beast clans in the 9 realms had inherited some of the bloodline of the innate divine beast. But they could only be called demonic beasts and ferocious beasts, not divine beasts. This was because only the first generation of beasts born from the primal chaos were qualified to be called innate divine beasts. Even their descendants were not qualified to be called innate divine beasts. An innate divine beast's egg could only be hatched from the primal chaos. Could it be that this is an innate divine beast that was born from the primal chaos and hasn't hatched? Chu Fengmian said in disbelief. An innate divine beast was something that had only appeared tens of thousands of years ago, or even more distant eras. Now, there was actually an innate divine beast's egg in the spirit spring. How could Chu Fengmian believe this? That should be the case. Xing Xian's words were also somewhat uncertain. Based on his judgment, the most he could determine was that this egg should be an innate divine beast's egg. However, he was also confused as to why this egg had appeared in the spirit spring. Even with his knowledge, he had never heard of such a ridiculous thing. An innate divine beast's egg had not hatched from the primal chaos, but had reappeared tens of thousands of years later. Moreover, Chu Fengmian could clearly feel that this egg still had vitality. This proved that this innate divine beast's egg was actually a living creature. An innate divine beast's egg is the most precious treasure in the world. Chu Fengmian's eyes were fixed on this innate divine beast's egg. Innate divine beasts were legendary existences that could destroy the world. Back when the primal chaos was shattered, these innate divine beasts had definitely contributed the most to the battle. Later on, when the primal chaos was shattered, all the innate divine beasts in the world had fallen. It could be said that if this innate divine beast's egg really hatched, it would be the only innate divine beast in the world. Chapter 947. What's the matter, kid? Do you want to tame the egg and make it recognize you as its master? Xing Xian suddenly said with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. Stop dreaming. An innate divine beast isn't something that can be tamed by humans. Innate divine beasts are born from chaos. It can be said that its bloodline is nobler than all living creatures. How can it be tamed? Xing Xian said Chu Fengmian's thoughts. The strength of an innate divine beast was reflected in countless legends. It could be said that even a 3-year-old child knew about it. It was impossible to say that Chu Fengmian wasn't tempted. Hearing Xing Xian's sarcasm, Chu Fengmian's expression didn't change. I can still give it a try. I'm afraid that no martial artist has ever tried to tame an innate divine beast. Chu Fengmian smiled. The opportunity is right in front of me. I can give it a try. The birth of innate divine beasts was even earlier than the birth of humans. Before humans created martial arts, innate divine beasts were already unhindered in the Desolation Era. In the Desolation Era, they were the overlord. Throughout history, no one had ever done such a crazy thing. It's a waste of effort. Xing Xian curled his lips. Is that so? Chu Fengmian said softly, as if he was replying to Xing Xian, but also as if he was talking to himself. If it was the Chu Fengmian of his previous life, he might also think that it was a waste of effort. However, this was something that had never happened to Chu Fengmian in his 2 lifetimes. Now it was happening to Chu Fengmian. Therefore, in Chu Fengmian's opinion, there was nothing impossible. If something like rebirth could happen to Chu Fengmian, then other things were also possible. Chu Fengmian observed the innate divine beast egg for a while. A drop of golden blood slowly dripped from his fingertip. Following Chu Fengmian's mind, it was sent to the side of the godly devouring python and dripped onto the eggshell of the innate divine beast egg. The eggshell was a glossy gray color. When the drop of golden blood landed on the surface, it gradually fused with the egg. What's going on? Is there no reaction? Chu Fengmian's consciousness was attached to the sky-devouring divine python to observe the egg. A drop of Chu Fengmian's golden blood landed on the egg and was sucked into it. However, nothing happened. Failed? Chu Fengmian couldn't make up his mind. An innate divine beast egg was something that had never been heard of even in ancient legends. They were even things that should not have existed in time. These connate divine beast eggs were born in the era when the chaos was created. Before the end of the chaos era, these innate divine beast eggs should have hatched. Who would have thought that there would be one left behind, and it was a living egg? While it was true that the eggs of ordinary demonic beasts could be assimilated with the blood essence, this was a Xiantian god beast we were talking about. Xing Xian's words weren't wrong. The bloodline of an innate divine beast was innately noble. Whether or not he could subdue it, Chu Fengmian was only giving it a try. Even if it was a failure, it was something that Chu Fengmian had expected. Just as he was about to give up, there was a sudden change in the place where the innate divine beast egg was located. The power of the innate divine beast egg, which had been dormant all this time, began to rise crazily. At the same time, the speed at which the egg devoured the surrounding chaos aura and spiritual power suddenly increased by hundreds of times. The huge attraction force instantly sucked in all the spiritual energy in the spiritual spring. It could be said that the entire spiritual spring was now in a state of chaos. What's going on? Chu Fengmian was a little flustered when he saw this change. He came to the spirit spring secretly. If he caused too much of a commotion, it would be troublesome for Chu Fengmian. Fortunately, the egg was located in the deepest part of the spirit spring. Although the commotion had spread out, the experts outside wouldn't notice it for a while. At the same time, Chu Fengmian's heart was filled with anticipation. The sudden change in the innate divine beast egg, which had been dormant all this time, was definitely unusual. It seemed that the drop of blood essence that Chu Fengmian had just dripped into the egg was not in vain. Is this possible? Xing Xian, who saw the scene in his mind, was speechless. He could naturally see that the change in the innate divine beast egg was definitely caused by the drop of blood essence that Chu Fengmian had dripped. Could it be that this brat is really a lucky cat that hit a dead mouse? Xing Xian said in disbelief. The innate divine beast egg was something that had never appeared in the legendary city. If it was really subdued, it would not only shock the 9 regions, but also any corner of the world. Subduing an innate divine beast with human strength was something that had never been described in the legendary city. While Chu Fengmian and Xing Xian were in shock, the egg of the innate divine beast had undergone another transformation. Countless arrays suddenly appeared from his eggshell. These arrays appeared in the air and turned into a huge vortex. The vortex expanded countless times and began to madly absorb the surrounding spiritual power. Almost in an instant, the spiritual power that was enough to devour hundreds of billions of spiritual stones was still expanding. In these few seconds, it could be said that the spiritual spring in the Beimang Academy was sucked dry. The spiritual spring in the Beimang Academy was enough to support the cultivation of countless disciples for tens of thousands of years. But in front of the innate divine beast egg, it would be sucked dry in a few seconds. How terrifying! Isn't the innate divine beast afraid of being stuffed to death after absorbing so much spiritual power? Chu Fengmian said with a dumbfounded expression. So much spiritual power was simply unimaginable. It could be said that if Chu Fengmian were to devour it, even if the spiritual power he needed was thousands or tens of thousands of times more than that of a martial artist, he would only be stuffed to death and explode. Compared to the innate divine beast egg, his battle dragon skill was not considered a big eater. This innate divine beast egg was, it's nothing for an innate divine beast to absorb such a little spiritual power. In the chaotic era, the chaotic aura was everywhere. How could it be so thin now that it's enough for an innate divine beast to be born? Chapter 948. Xing Xian said excitedly as he watched the transformation of the innate divine beast egg. I suspect that this innate divine beast egg didn't hatch because it didn't absorb enough chaotic aura in the chaotic era due to various changes. It's now hiding in the spiritual spring and constantly devouring the chaotic aura. It's about to reach a critical point. Your blood essence stimulated it and it should hatch soon. No one in the capital of 9 domains had ever been able to witness the hatching of an innate divine beast. Xing Xian was also very excited. It was rare for him to be so concerned about something. The divine sky-devouring python stayed quietly around the innate divine beast egg. The devouring vortex seemed to be only devouring the spiritual energy and chaotic aura in the spiritual spring. As for the divine sky-devouring python, the innate divine beast egg didn't seem to be interested in it at all. The devouring process lasted for a full minute. Chu Fengmian could feel that a large piece of empty space had been devoured in the huge spiritual spring. At least 1/3 of the spiritual spring had been devoured by the innate divine beast egg all of a sudden. Could it be that the spiritual spring has been completely devoured by the innate divine beast egg? Chu Fengmian looked at all this with his mouth wide open. He didn't know what to say. He was amazed. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have thought that there would be something that could devour spiritual energy in such a way. Could it be the egg of the divine sky-devouring beast? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but think. Among the innate divine beasts, there was a divine sky-devouring beast that was said to have the ability to devour the heavens. It could devour heaven and earth and everything. The divine sky-devouring python formed by Chu Fengmian's spiritual energy was actually a descendant of the divine sky-devouring beast and had inherited its devouring ability. It shouldn't be. Xing Xian thought for a moment and shook his head. The innate divine beasts in history didn't have the same kind. Each of them was a unique individual. Therefore, this egg shouldn't be the divine sky-devouring beast egg. Since the innate divine beast has the power to destroy heaven and earth, it should be normal for it to devour more spiritual energy. When he said this, Xing Xian even felt a little lacking in confidence. Indeed, it was true that it had devoured more spiritual energy. However, it devouring 1/3 of the spiritual spring was a little too terrifying. This spirit spring was the largest spirit spring in the 9 regions. It could be said that the spirit springs of any of the 7 great sects were not even 1/3 as large as this one. This meant that the divine sky-devouring beast egg was enough to suck the spiritual spring of one of the 7 sects. Chu Fengmian didn't even dare to think about how much spiritual energy it had devoured. Chu Fengmian even suspected that the egg would suck the entire spiritual spring dry. After a while, the divine sky-devouring divine beast egg. And the divine sky-devouring beast egg. However, by now, half of the spiritual spring's spiritual energy had been devoured by the innate divine beast egg. In the midst of the silence, a clear voice could be heard all of a sudden. Although it was insignificant in Chu Fengmian's eyes, there was no excitement. The divine sky-devouring beast egg was finally going to hatch. Chu Fengmian's expression was one of extreme caution. Even a newborn baby of an innate divine beast would possess such terrifying power. Once it attacked Chu Fengmian, it would have to withdraw its consciousness from the sky-devouring divine python. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome for Chu Fengmian's consciousness. Crack! The crisp shattering sounds gradually increased in number. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the divine sky-devouring beast egg. More and more cracks appeared. At the same time, Chu Fengmian could feel that a small life had suddenly awakened in the egg. Be careful! Xing Xian gave a rare warning. Even if it was a newly hatched divine beast, it was still the most terrifying existence in the world. Chu Fengmian nodded. He naturally knew this. That was why the sky-devouring divine python didn't approach the egg. Instead, it observed the changes in the egg from afar. Crack! At the last cracking sound, the cracks on the surface of the divine sky-devouring beast egg were all connected. Then, it suddenly shattered in the air. The moment the eggshell broke, all of the eggshells suddenly disappeared from the void. Seeing this, Chu Fengmian felt a little heartache. Anything related to the divine sky-devouring beast was invaluable. Originally, Chu Fengmian wanted to collect these eggshells. These eggshells were simply much harder than any of the spirit tools he had ever seen. If he could refine a spiritual weapon, it would definitely be a protective spiritual weapon not inferior to the Kanglin immortal armor. Now all of them were shattered. But soon, Chu Fengmian didn't think about it anymore. His real goal was the divine sky-devouring beast. Chu Fengmian's gaze followed the broken eggshell. Suddenly, his eyes showed some surprise. At the place where the eggshell was, something about 1/2 meter tall was standing there. From afar, this thing had a body of pure white long fur. It looked somewhat similar to a cat, but it was much rounder. At a glance, it was round and plump. What is this thing? Chu Fengmian looked at the round creature in front of him. It was simply beyond his imagination. Chu Fengmian had imagined countless times what this divine sky-devouring beast egg could hatch into. Ancestor Tianlong, divine flame Qilin, and sky-devouring beast. Each of them were famous and extremely terrifying existences in ancient times. However, this round creature in front of him was completely different from the divine sky-devouring beast in Chu Fengmian's mind. Xing Xian, what kind of divine sky-devouring beast is this? Chu Fengmian thought for a while, but couldn't think of anything similar to this round creature in front of him. I don't know. Divine sky-devouring beasts are all independent existences. This one is obviously different from any other divine sky-devouring beast, Xing Xian replied. Although his voice sounded calm, he wasn't any better than Chu Fengmian. He was just as surprised as Chu Fengmian. A divine sky-devouring beast, at least in appearance, was an existence without dignity. Chapter 949. In the Land of Spiritual Spring. While Chu Fengmian was observing the round creature also noticed Chu Fengmian's presence. The moment it looked over, Chu Fengmian felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. Terrifying. When it looked at Chu Fengmian, it was as if Chu Fengmian was going to be killed. Even though the creature's appearance was strange, it was still an innate divine beast, the most terrifying existence in the world. Just when Chu Fengmian was about to give up on the divine sky-devouring python and withdraw his consciousness, the hostility suddenly disappeared. Then, the round innate divine beast ran directly in the direction of the divine sky-devouring python. In the Land of Spiritual Spring, everyone could only fly. However, the round innate divine beast ran over with a hop. Chu Fengmian couldn't even tell if the round innate divine beast used its power. 9. From his chest, he could still vaguely say something. 9? Chu Fengmian obviously couldn't understand what the innate divine beast was saying. Is this guy really an innate divine beast? Aren't the legendary innate divine beasts able to speak human language? Chu Fengmian asked suspiciously. He had been doubting Xing Xian's judgment more than once. But no matter what, the strength of this little guy must be extremely terrifying. Although Chu Fengmian couldn't feel the strength of this little guy, Chu Fengmian felt fear from the bottom of his heart when he was targeted by the hostility just now. He had to bear a great pressure in an instant. Even if 10 supreme ancestors joined forces, they wouldn't be able to give Chu Fengmian such a great pressure. Xing Xian observed and said slowly, "This little guy has just hatched. According to humans, it's just a baby. Of course, it can't speak human language." Hearing Xing Xian's words, Chu Fengmian nodded secretly. Indeed, this little guy had just hatched. It could be said that the most terrifying thing was that it had such a terrifying strength when it was just hatched. 9. The round innate divine beast ran over and hugged the divine sky-devouring python. It was still saying something vaguely. This little guy, before Chu Fengmian finished his words, his eyes suddenly changed. Vaguely, Chu Fengmian felt that there were several extremely terrifying auras coming directly to the Land of Spiritual Spring. It seemed that the earth-shaking changes in the Land of Spiritual Spring couldn't be hidden from the experts of Sky-Reaching Tower. The owner of each of these auras was many times stronger than Chu Fengmian. They were all old ancestors of the immortal realm. Let's go. Chu Fengmian looked at the round connate sacred beast and said anxiously, "Come with me." Now, he didn't care if the innate divine beast could understand him or not. Although Chu Fengmian was unable to make him recognize him as his master, he would definitely be of great help if he continued to follow Chu Fengmian. To the was to take it. It was to the ofs. Was s. 9. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, the innate divine beast was a little confused. However, it still turned into a ray of light and went into the divine sky-devouring python. The innate divine beast was indeed the darling of heaven and earth. Even a newborn innate divine beast could understand Chu Fengmian's words. Let's go. Chu Fengmian's divine sky-devouring python disappeared quietly. Less than half a minute after the divine sky-devouring python disappeared, 3 figures came to the place where the innate divine beast egg was. However, the Land of Spiritual Spring had undergone earth-shaking changes. Looking at the changes in the Spiritual Spring, the expressions of the 3 figures were all filled with shock. That mysterious egg actually disappeared? What happened? How could there be such a big movement? Half of the spiritual energy in the Land of Spiritual Spring has disappeared. Could it be that someone sneaked into the Land of Spiritual Spring and took the egg away? None of the 3 figures were able to figure out what was going on. What exactly happened in the Land of Spiritual Spring? In just a few minutes, the Land of Spiritual Spring had undergone a great change by the time they reacted. Half of the spiritual energy in the Land of Spiritual Spring had disappeared completely. It shouldn't be that someone sneaked in. The land of spiritual spring was set up by us. No one from the 9 domains could sneak in without a sound. One of the figures, a white-haired elder, said slowly. Furthermore, that mysterious egg is most definitely not something that can be subdued and taken away by humans. Anyone who touches it will be met with a calamity. At this point, the white-haired elder couldn't help but shake his head. When they first discovered this mysterious egg, they also had the thought of capturing it. However, they were met with a calamity. A supreme ancestor died on the spot. Since then, no one dared to have any ideas about the egg. Does that mean that the egg suddenly disappeared on its own? Another eagle-faced man beside the white-haired old man said with a cold look in his eyes. It's just an egg. Can it spread its legs and run away? If an egg can't run away, what if it hatches? Hearing the eagle-nosed man's words, the last figure beside him, a middle-aged lady, said coldly. That egg has always been alive. Moreover, the spiritual energy in the surroundings was suddenly devoured. It's very likely that the egg hatched and the creature inside it ran away. Hatched? Then let's find it quickly. The egg is so powerful. The creature inside it is very likely to be an extremely powerful ancient beast. Hearing the beautiful lady's words, the eagle-nosed man said hurriedly, Bai Feng, you should grow some brains. We can't even deal with the egg. Is the creature inside it something we can deal with? The middle-aged lady said disdainfully. You! Hearing the sarcasm, the eagle-nosed man called Bai Feng was furious. Don't argue any more. Let's report this matter to the elders first. The white-haired old man's words stopped the fight. We are here to guard the land of spiritual spring and the egg. Now that the egg has disappeared, let's report it to the pavilion master. That's right. Stop arguing. The middle-aged lady sneered. Then let's go. Chapter 950. I've really earned a lot this time. After devouring countless chaotic auras, my 9 realms swordsmanship has reached a perfect level. Returning to the courtyard, Chu Fengmian sat on the stone bench, feeling carefree. He had really earned a lot by choosing to live in the sky-reaching tower this time. Chu Fengmian sneaked into the spiritual spring and devoured the chaotic aura there. His 9 realms swordsmanship had reached the most perfect level of its current realm. Although there was no change in Chu Fengmian's realm, Chu Fengmian's true combat strength had increased tremendously. If Chu Fengmian broke through to the Destiny realm and became an emperor in the future, Chu Fengmian might even have the power to fight against Ancestor Wu. Of course, all of this was not Chu Fengmian's greatest opportunity. His greatest opportunity this time was the innate divine beast. By the way, where did the little guy go? Just now, Chu Fengmian saw the little guy turn into a stream of light and enter the sky-devouring divine python. However, now that Chu Fengmian returned to the courtyard, there was no trace of the little guy. Chu Fengmian spent a lot of effort to bring the innate divine beast out of the spiritual spring. If it disappeared, it would be troublesome. Chu Fengmian hurriedly activated his spiritual power to explore every corner of the courtyard. This courtyard was not big. Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense quickly scanned it, but he did not find the trace of the innate divine beast. It's not here. Chu Fengmian's eyes were a little surprised. He just felt that the innate divine beast should have followed Chu Fengmian and left the spiritual spring. But now it was not in the courtyard? Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian hurriedly activated his spiritual sense to explore the little guy's body. Then, Chu Fengmian's face revealed an indescribable strange feeling. On Chu Fengmian's body, on the crown of the divine tree, the little guy was lying on the crown of the tree. He even remodeled the crown of the tree, making it look like he was building a nest. Clearly, he was treating the sacred tree as his nest. Oh? This little guy should have sensed the aura of the divine tree, which is of the same origin as it, so it ran to the divine tree. Xing Xian suddenly said. The tree of God and the connate divine beasts are the earliest life forms born from the chaos of heaven and earth. They can be said to be of the same origin. It's normal for this little guy to be close to the tree of God. This little guy really knows how to enjoy himself. Chu Fengmian looked at the divine tree and couldn't help but smile. This little guy first connected a few branches of the tree of God together to build a frame. Then, he spread the leaves of the tree of God on the ground to make a soft bed. He was lying there quietly, as if he was resting. Little fellow? Chu Fengmian called out softly. This connate divine beast must have understood Chu Fengmian's words, so Chu Fengmian began to converse with him. Hearing Chu Fengmian's voice, the innate sacred beast glanced at Chu Fengmian and mumbled, 9. This caused Chu Fengmian to feel somewhat helpless. This little fellow was able to understand his words. Unfortunately, Chu Fengmian was unable to understand his words. Forget it. Since you like this tree of God, you can rest here. Oh right, you don't have a name yet, right? Since you're called 9, then I'll call you Lil 9. Chu Fengmian looked at Lil 9 and said calmly. This little fellow seemed to be quite satisfied with the name Lil 9. After Chu Fengmian called it 9 a few more times, it returned to the tree of God and closed its eyes to sleep. It actually fell asleep. This little fellow's current strength should be around that of a ruler. It should be stronger than most rulers, but it shouldn't be a match for great ancestor Wu. Chu Fengmian looked at the sleeping Lil 9 and thought to himself, a newly born connate divine beast actually possessed strength comparable to that of a ruler. This was already extremely shocking. One had to know that most people or demonic beasts would never reach the level of a ruler in their entire lives. Only tens of millions of people could possibly give birth to a ruler. This kind of connate divine beast would stand at the peak of the 9 regions as soon as it made its move. Moreover, as it grew up in the future, it would also grow bit by bit. At that time, it was very likely that it would be much more terrifying than anyone in the 9 regions. Chu Fengmian took a few glances and left with his spiritual sense. He sat on the spot and continued to comprehend the sword technique. Another 2 days passed. Chu Fengmian's eyes slowly opened. In these 4 days, Chu Fengmian used the aura of chaos to practice his sword technique. It could be said that the effect of 40 years of bitter cultivation was much more useful. If there's an ancient spiritual spring, I can use the aura of chaos to practice my sword technique anytime and anywhere. Chu Fengmian could not help but sigh. The aura of chaos was really one of the most divine things in the world. With the aura of chaos, Chu Fengmian's practice of swordsmanship would be thousands of times faster. However, there were very few spiritual springs with the aura of chaos in the 9 regions, and they were tightly controlled by the major forces of the 9 regions. It was almost impossible for Chu Fengmian to obtain it alone. After the transformation of the spiritual spring in sky-reaching tower, it would be almost impossible to sneak in again. However, there would be a day when Chu Fengmian's strength was enough to reach the peak of the 9 regions. At that time, he would come for the spiritual spring again. Senior, the ancient fighting arena is about to open. Just as Chu Fengmian got up, a voice came from outside the courtyard. It seemed that the young attendant of Sky-reaching Tower had come to call Chu Fengmian. Yes. Chu Fengmian got up and walked out of the courtyard in a single step. In Sky-reaching Tower, Gu Jin was already standing outside, waiting for Chu Fengmian. At the same time, Chu Fengmian saw that Gu Jin's aura had undergone earth-shattering changes in the past 4 days. Her cultivation had been forcibly broken by Chu Fengmian, and her foundation was unstable. Using the aura of chaos was enough to stabilize her foundation. Although there was no change in Gu Jin's cultivation, her strength was at least twice as strong as it was 4 days ago. Facing an ordinary unblemished realm expert at the 4th step of the life and death steps, as long as he did not encounter the geniuses of the 7 major sects, he would have a great chance of winning. Chapter 951. You've stabilized your cultivation. What you lack now is combat. The 9 Regions Genius Tournament is the best training for you. Chu Fengmian looked at Gu Jin and smiled. Gu Jin's talent wasn't considered weak, but she couldn't be compared to the true geniuses of the 7 sections. However, after being nurtured by Chu Fengmian, Gu Jin wasn't inferior to the ordinary geniuses of the 7 sections. However, what she lacked was combat experience. It was meaningless to have strength but not know how to fight. Yes. Gu Jin nodded. She was extremely grateful to Chu Fengmian. If it weren't for Chu Fengmian, she wouldn't have been able to reach her current level of strength. Not to mention, she was now on equal footing with the disciples of the 7 sections. Let's go. Chu Fengmian saw them. In many of the surrounding rooms, the cultivators who were cultivating there had left one after another. Most of the cultivators in Sky Piercer Tower were here to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. At a glance, Chu Fengmian saw many experts. The 9 Regions Genius Tournament, the biggest event for the younger generation of the 9 regions, is finally about to begin. Chu Fengmian's eyes shone with excitement. Chu Fengmian had heard about the 9 Regions Genius Tournament for a long time. He was very excited to be able to participate in it himself. Furthermore, this time, it seemed to be more prosperous than any of the previous ones. Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin left Sky Piercer Tower and headed straight for the heart of Martial Imperial City. After leaving the Heavenly Tower, the streets of the Martial Imperial City were filled with people. The number of cultivators who came to participate in or watch the 9 Regions Genius Tournament was in the tens of millions every year. All of the cultivators were heading in the same direction. Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin were among the crowd. They walked slowly and arrived at the heart of Martial Imperial City in a short while. There was a huge teleportation array at the center of this place. Countless cultivators had disappeared from the teleportation array. About an hour later, Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin finally arrived in front of the transportation array. They gathered their spiritual energy and poured it into the array. Immediately, their figures disappeared from Martial Imperial City. When they opened their eyes again, they were already in a completely different place. A desert. As far as the eye could see, there was only an endless desert nearby. In front of Chu Fengmian was a huge arena in the middle of the desert. The ancient era's battle arena was huge and could accommodate millions of spectators at once. It could be said that some cities were much larger. In the middle of the ancient fighting arena there was a huge arena. Looking from the outside, it was at least a few hundred miles wide. Chu Fengmian knew that the arena of the ancient era's battle arena was not as small as it appeared from the outside. A few hundred kilometers in length and width might be enough for some weaker martial artists. The 9 Regions Geniuses competition was an event left behind from the ancient era. It could be said that back then there had been countless geniuses. Every time the 9 Regions Genius Tournament was held, some immortal realm old ancestors would participate in it. According to the rules of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, as long as one was under 100 years old, one could participate regardless of one's cultivation level. As long as they were of age, even if they were a supreme ancestor, they could participate. Of course, in the current era, it had been tens of thousands of years since a genius of this level had appeared. However, every time, there would be some geniuses who had reached the destiny realm and became emperors. A battle between emperors could cause the sky to fall and the earth to crack with a wave of their hands. An area of 1,000,000 miles could be destroyed for them. Therefore, there was another world inside the arena. It was thousands or tens of thousands of times larger than what it looked like from the outside. No matter what level a martial artist was at, they could fight to their heart's content. There are still empty seats over there. Let's go over. Chu Fengmian looked over and saw that there were still some empty seats. Now, most of the seats in the ancient era's battle arena were already full. Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin sat a little closer to the outer circle. At a glance, they were inconspicuous. In the ancient era's battle arena, the most central seats were basically the peerless geniuses of the 7 great sections. Oh, there are actually so many young emperors? Chu Fengmian saw that there were at least a dozen young emperors sitting below. They were all under the age of 100. These people were all geniuses that the 7 great sects had tried their best to nurture. They were monstrous geniuses and had the possibility of becoming supreme great ancestors in the future. It seemed that the foundation of the 7 great sects was not as weak as Chu Fengmian had imagined. They indeed had some strength. However, Chu Fengmian thought in the blink of an eye. For example, the 6 demonic sects had been quiet for tens of thousands of years. This time, the 6 supremacies who appeared were all emperors. Otherwise, they were also figures whose strength was comparable to emperors. They were also less than 100 years old. Especially the Devil Emperor, he was a genius among geniuses. He was similar to Chu Fengmian. In fact, when they fought back then, he even suppressed Chu Fengmian. The 6 demonic sects that had been quiet for 10,000 years were already like this, let alone the 7 great sects at their peak. These emperors present might not be the strongest batch of geniuses from the 7 great sections. At least, some of the people that Chu Fengmian had heard of were not here yet. Whoosh! In the distance, a dazzling sword light suddenly flashed. This sword light was as fast as lightning, so no one could see it clearly. In an instant, it fell into the ancient era's battle arena. When the sword light dissipated, the surrounding martial artists slowly saw that the sword light was actually a young man. The escape light was like a sword light. This escape light was so fast that people could not see it clearly. It's Jian Zhanxian, the super genius of the Tianjian sect. Jian Zhanxian, even Jian Zhanxian is here. Is he going to participate this year? Hasn't he not come to participate in the past 2 years? Why is he suddenly here? Seeing the young man's figure, countless martial artists in the surroundings cried out in surprise. Jian Zhanxian? What an arrogant name! Chu Fengmian's gaze also fell on Jian Zhanxian. The sword intent on his body was extremely sharp. It could be said that the sword intent on the bodies of many great ancestors of the sword cultivation level that Chu Fengmian had seen was much more terrifying. Jian Zhanxian had cultivated an extremely sharp sword intent. At least in terms of swordsmanship, this Jian Zhanxian had gone very far. It seemed that the Tianjian sect was not as simple as it seemed. The real genius just did not usually appear. Gu Jin, who is this Jian Zhanxian? Chapter 952. Jian Zhanxian. The name sounded arrogant and domineering, but Chu Fengmian knew it well. Behind this name, there was an even deeper origin. Unsurprisingly, the sword-slaying immortal had also come to participate in the 9 Realms Genius battle. Chu Fengmian would never underestimate any opponent. Moreover, the sword immortal before him was enough to make Chu Fengmian take him seriously. Gu Jin recovered from her shock when she heard Chu Fengmian calling out to Jian Zhanxian. It seemed that even she was extremely shocked by the appearance of the celestial slaying sword. After calming herself down, she explained. Jian Zhanxian is a rare genius in the Tianjian sect. He joined the Tianjian sect when he was young and won the first place on the list of top 100 talents when he was 15. He entered the Destiny realm when he was 40 and became an emperor. He even won the 7th place in the 9 Regions Genius battle. He didn't participate in the next 2 competitions. It's said that he's now the top disciple in the Tianjian sect and is being groomed to be the next sect master of the Tianjian sect. I didn't expect him to be here this time. Jian Zhanxian hadn't participated in the 9 Regions Genius battle for the past 2 years. Chu Fengmian didn't expect him to show up every time. He inherited the title of Immortal Slayer at such a young age. It seems that this guy is indeed a sword genius. Chu Fengmian thought to himself after hearing Gu Jin's words. Becoming an emperor at the age of 40 was an incredible speed. For martial artists, those who could surpass life and death and become patriarchs before the age of 100 were considered geniuses. As for becoming an emperor, they were even more geniuses. Jian Zhanxian did all this at the age of 40. 20 years had passed. Jian Zhanxian's realm hadn't changed, but his strength had become much more terrifying. Even such a genius has appeared. It seems that there's something hidden behind the 9 regions genius battle. Chu Fengmian had a guess when he heard from Luo Shi that the Demon Emperor would also participate in the 9 regions genius battle. This time, the 9 regions genius battle would definitely be different from the past. Jian Zhanxian's appearance made Chu Fengmian even more convinced of his previous conjecture. Senior brother immortal slaying, your appearance this time has caused quite a stir. Sitting next to Jian Zhanxian, several disciples of the Tianjian sect were laughing and chatting, discussing everyone's surprise. Jian Zhanxian hadn't appeared in 20 years. Originally, everyone thought that he had lost interest in the 9 regions genius battle. It's just a boring discussion. My goal is to win the championship. Sword-slaying immortal's gaze was cold. His eyes were as sharp as swords. It was as if he didn't care about anything other than the sword Dao. With senior brother immortal slaying taking the field, the championship will definitely belong to you this time. Several Tianjian sect disciples beside him hurriedly tried to flatter him. The discussion about Jian Zhanxian's appearance in the ancient fighting ground had yet to fade away. From afar, another figure flew over. No, it was more accurate to say that the figure walked over. It was another young man. He walked in the air as if he were walking on flat ground. Waves of spiritual power condensed under his feet to form a unique path. Wherever he went, the path would extend to wherever he went. Huang Wu! It's him? He's here too? What's going on? Why did the 9 regions genius battle attract so many monstrous geniuses? Huang Wu's appearance shocked the surrounding cultivators. It was no less shocking than Jian Zhanxian's appearance. Huang Wu is the young master of the desolate ancient sect. His status is much more precious than most of the patriarchs. He hasn't participated in the 9 regions genius battle for 3 consecutive years. Why is he here this time? Gu Jin asked in surprise beside Chu Fengmian. More and more unexpected characters were arriving. Sword Immortal Slayer, Desolate, these were all characters who had been famous for a long time. Although they weren't even 100 years old, they were still qualified to participate in the 9 regions genius battle. However, they had all obtained decent rankings in the 9 regions geniuses battle. They had already obtained extremely high statuses. Logically speaking, they shouldn't have taken the 9 regions genius battle seriously. However, they were all here this time. When Sword Immortal saw Desolate Void, he raised his head and glanced at him. There was no surprise in his eyes, only battle intent. Interesting. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a smile. If the 9 regions genius battle was as calm as before, it wouldn't be interesting. These hidden experts had all appeared. This was the true 9 regions geniuses battle. What's going on? Jian Zhanxian, Huang Wu, why are they here? Many of the spectating warriors in the ancient fighting ring felt that something was amiss. If Jian Zhanxian had appeared alone, it could be that he was bored and came to participate. This could be considered a reason. However, even Huang Wu had appeared. This was unusual. Moreover, not everyone had arrived yet. There were still some empty seats in the seats of the 7 great sections. This proved that there were still people who hadn't arrived. Brother Zhanxian, Brother Huang Wu, you're early. A loud and small voice suddenly rang out in the air, and another figure appeared. Compared to Jian Zhanxian and Huang Wu, this person seemed much calmer. However, when they saw the purple light enveloping him, no one dared to underestimate him. Gongsun Tianjue. That fierce person is here too. The moment Gongsun Tianjue landed, everyone present could feel a ferocious aura. It was as if they were being stared at by a hungry wolf. This is the divine body of Heaven's End? Chu Fengmian sized up Gongsun Tianjue. He also felt as if he was being stared at by a lone wolf. The divine body of Heaven's End was ranked 8th among the top 10 innate divine bodies. It was one of the most terrifying innate divine bodies. Chu Fengmian had killed Yi Tianjun, the holy son of Beimang Academy. He had the Chaos Divine Body, which was also a terrifying constitution. However, it was only ranked 10th among the innate divine bodies. It barely squeezed into the top 10. The divine body of Heaven's End was ranked 8. It was even stronger than the Chaos Divine Body. The stronger a cultivator with an innate divine body was, the more terrifying the innate divine body's power would be. Gongsun Tianjue had already stepped into the heavenly mandate realm. As an emperor, he could use his divine body of Heaven's End freely. Chapter 953. After the appearance of 3 monstrous geniuses, the crowd's reaction was no longer as intense as before. Some of the more observant ones could already tell that this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament was extraordinary. Gongsun Tianjue wouldn't be the last. As expected, not long after, a few more figures appeared one after another. A young man in a long robe descended from the sky. At a glance, this young man didn't look like a martial artist, but more like an alchemist. Beside him, Gu Jin had already told Chu Fengmian the young man's identity. Yao Zhe, the young master of medicine King Valley. Like Jian Zhanxian, Huang Wu, and Gongsun Tianjue, they were all geniuses of their generation, the cream of the crop. Next, those from Sage Monarch Sect, Alpha Hall, and 9 Demon City should be arriving. Chu Fengmian muttered to himself. Before he could finish his sentence, another 3 figures descended from the sky. The tallest of them was Wu Hongtian from Sage Monarch Sect. His muscles bulged, and he was a typical disciple of Sage Monarch Sect. Beside Wu Hongtian was a young woman. This caused Chu Fengmian to be surprised. The strongest of this generation of Alpha Hall was a woman. She wore a robe made of stars which made her look mysterious. Alpha Hall had always been a symbol of mystery. It was the mysterious path of astronomical phenomena. Even Chu Fengmian didn't know much about Alpha Hall. However, no one dared to question the strength of Alpha Hall. Alpha Hall's Xing Xianqing is said to be the most beautiful woman in the 9 regions. Gu Jin, who was sitting beside Chu Fengmian, suddenly said with a smile, "I wonder if you're interested in her? The most beautiful woman in the 9 regions?" Chu Fengmian smiled when he heard this. He didn't know how much this title had to do with Xing Xuanqing's identity. After all, she was the only woman in the younger generation. However, Gu Jin's words made Chu Fengmian feel a little better. To be called the most beautiful woman in the 9 regions, what did Xing Xianqing look like? Quietly, Chu Fengmian activated his spiritual consciousness and approached Xing Xianqing, wanting to see her true appearance behind her robe. However, Chu Fengmian's spiritual consciousness was devoured by her robe. Even with Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense, he couldn't see through Xing Xuanqing's robe. "You have some skills." Chu Fengmian tried several times, but to no avail. Only then did he slowly withdraw his spirit sense. The techniques of Dubhe Hall indeed had some tricks up their sleeve. Even Chu Fengmian's spiritual sense couldn't see through them. If there was a chance in the future, Chu Fengmian really wanted to see Xing Xuanqing's true face. As long as Chu Fengmian fought with her, there might be a chance. Chu Fengmian didn't want to stir up trouble with so many people around. His gaze once again landed on the last figure. The last person was a genius from the 9 Demon City. He was a man in a black robe. Although his face could not be seen clearly, he was surrounded by a terrifying demonic aura. This demonic will caused many warriors to frown. Although 9 Demon City was one of the 7 great sects, most of the cultivators who cultivated demonic arts stayed in 9 Demon City and avoided it. "Mo Skysplitter, it really is him." The Demon Emperor rebelled and left. He's the only one in 9 Demon City who can take on this responsibility. The most outstanding person among the younger generation in 9 Demon City wasn't Mo Skysplitter, but the Demon Emperor. However, everyone in the 9 regions knew that the Demon Emperor had left 9 Demon City and joined the 6 Demon Gate. The 6 Demon Gates were becoming more and more active in the 9 regions. There were already rumors that the 6 Demon Gates would become the 8th great sect in the 9 regions. When Mo Skysplitter heard the discussion about the Demon Emperor, his eyes turned gloomy. The Demon Emperor's rebellion was a huge mess that Nine Demon City had never experienced in the past 10,000 years. Nine Demon City's strength was enough to be ranked first among the 7 great sections. But now it was only around the corner. It could be seen how many people the Demon Emperor had taken away from Nine Demon City. The people from the 7 great sects are all here. Who else will come? Do you think the Demon Emperor will come? A series of discussions took place all of a sudden. The most famous cultivator of the younger generation in the 9 regions was none other than the Demon Emperor. The news of Chu Fengmian killing countless disciples of the 7 great sects in the Sinkhole Celestial Land had spread throughout the 9 realms and was a hot topic of discussion. But when it came to the 9 regions' monstrous geniuses, the first person that came to mind was the Demon Emperor. He used to be the strongest person in Nine Demon City and was said to be the leader of the demonic path. No one knew his real name. Everyone called him Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor represented his identity. The Demon Emperor leaving Nine Demon City and inheriting the 6 demon gates was a huge matter that shook the 9 regions. Many people were looking forward to the Demon Emperor's participation in the 9 regions' genius battle. They wanted to see if the Demon Emperor could show his true face. Ha 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 ha. So many people want to see me? In the midst of the discussion, a burst of arrogant laughter descended from the sky. That voice was extremely arrogant. Even before that person arrived, everyone could tell that the person who spoke was an extremely arrogant person. There was only one person in the world who could do that. The Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor is really here. Countless people looked up at the sky, wanting to see the Demon Emperor's true face. The first person to descend from the sky was an extremely handsome man, the Demon Emperor. Based on his appearance alone, no one would have imagined that this handsome man was the Demon Emperor who had stirred up a storm in the 9 regions. Beside the Demon Emperor, there were also 4 people who had descended together with him. These 4 people, 1 male and 1 female, followed beside the Demon Emperor. The 2 of them were rulers of the Fate Realm. Moreover, Chu Fengmian looked over and saw that they were only in their early 30s, and they looked like they were only in their 20s. 2 emperors in their early 30s. So young. Who are these 2? I've never heard of them. It's said that the 6 demon gates have 6 supremes who are extremely young emperors. These 2 must be, how terrifying. They're only in their early 30s, but they're already emperors. How can such people be willing to work for the Demon Emperor? No, look at those 2 old men. Behind the man and woman were 2 aged old men. Although the 2 old men had concealed their auras, they were able to sense the auras of the 2 old men. Although their auras were concealed, if one looked closely, they would feel a sense of terror. Chapter 954. Immortal Realm. Ancestor Wu. It was unknown who was the first to speak, breaking the silence of the ancient fighting ring. The 2 elders standing beside the Demon Emperor were Ancestor Wu of the Immortal Realm. They were the top figures in the 9 domains. The rise of the 6 paths demonic gates also happened in the past few months. Everyone had doubts about the 6 paths demon sect's strength. However, after seeing the 2 old men, all of his suspicions were gone. 2 Ancestor Wu realms. With just the 2 Ancestor Wu realms, the 6 demon sects were second only to the 7 great sects in the 9 regions. Demon Emperor, what are you doing here? Seeing the arrival of the Demon Emperor, a figure suddenly rushed out of the ancient gladiator arena. It was an elder with a giant sword on his back. It's Immortal Jian Ke. The appearance of the elder caused a commotion. The elder's aura was not weaker than the 2 elders behind the Demon Emperor. He was also an Immortal Realm Ancestor Wu. The Juk Sword. Chu Fengmian's gaze followed the direction of Immortal Jian Quebec. However, Chu Fengmian's gaze was not on Immortal Jian Ke, but the giant sword on his back. The giant sword looked simple and unadorned. Layers of inscriptions were engraved on the body of the sword. When all the inscriptions were combined, they faintly formed the words, Juk. Damn it! Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with killing intent. The Juk sword was one of the swords of the former Master of Sword Principle. It was later given to Chu Fengmian's fourth senior brother. He did not expect it to fall into the hands of the Tianjian sect. Young Master. Gu Jin, who was sitting beside Chu Fengmian, seemed to be shocked by Chu Fengmian's killing intent. This was the first time she saw Chu Fengmian's killing intent. It was terrifying to the extreme. Even she, who was sitting beside him, could not help but shudder at the murderous intent. I'm fine. Hearing Gu Jin's words, Chu Fengmian's killing intent gradually dissipated. No, it should be said that he hid his killing intent. He buried it in the bottom of his heart. Now was not the time for revenge. He could not reveal Chu Fengmian's identity. This was the ancient fighting arena, and it was unknown how many experts from the 7 great sects were hidden inside. Once Chu Fengmian's identity was exposed, he would definitely be attacked by the crowd. However, there would be a day when Chu Fengmian would slaughter the 7 great sections. At that time, he would have to take everything back by himself. Although Chu Fengmian's killing intent was shocking, it didn't attract too much attention. The attention of most of the cultivators present was still focused on the sky, on the body of Sage Jian-Ke, who had suddenly appeared. Enlightened Jian-Ke rushed out. The 2 ancestors of the 6 Paths Demon sect looked solemn as they stood in front of the Demon Emperor to block him. Don't panic. The Demon Emperor waved his hand and said to the 2 old men. The 2 old men quietly retreated and stood beside the Demon Emperor. Demon Emperor, what are you doing here? Sage Jian-Ke said to the Demon Emperor. You killed countless disciples of the Tianjian sect. How dare you come here today? Oh? Why wouldn't I dare? Everyone can participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Why can't I come? The Demon Emperor sneered as he faced Venerable Jian Quebec. Also, those useless people of the Tianjian sect are dead. My 6 Paths Demon sect will dominate the 9 regions again. Those who refuse to submit will all die. The Demon Emperor's words were extremely arrogant, but no one dared to laugh at him after hearing them. The 6 Paths Demon sect indeed stood at the top of the 9 regions and dominated the 9 regions. Good. Good. As expected of the Demon Emperor. You're really arrogant. Another figure soared into the sky from the ancient battleground and stood beside the Demon Monarch, facing him in the air. It was the young sect master of the Tianjian sect, Jian Zhanxian. Elder Jian-Ke, today is the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. It's better not to make a big fuss. Jian Zhanxian spoke casually to Sage Jian Quebec. At the same time, he looked at the Demon Emperor. Demon Emperor, I know why you're here. Since you're here to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, we'll meet in the arena sooner or later. I'll kill you then. I'll kill you. The words sword immortal slaying sword were heart-wrenching, just like his name. Sword slaying immortals, every action and every word was like a sharp sword, making it impossible for people to withstand. Then I'll wait for you. When the Demon Emperor heard Jian Zhanxian's words, a cold smile appeared on his face, after which, his figure landed in the ancient fighting arena. The cultivators of the 6 Paths Demon Gate beside him followed the Demon Emperor and descended to the ground. He's the Demon Emperor? He's even more arrogant than the one who started the legendary land. No matter how strong the Demon Emperor is, he's only in the heart-tempering realm. He hasn't even become an emperor yet. How can he fight against Jian Zhanxian? Is he the peak of the younger generation? One of the warriors looked at the realm of the Demon Emperor and asked in a puzzled manner. The Demon Emperor's realm was only in the heart-tempering realm. If he was placed in the younger generation, he would be considered a genius. However, this was only an evaluation of ordinary people. The legendary Demon Emperor was someone who could stand at the peak of the younger generation, like sword-cutting immortal and desolate void. In this case, the heart-tempering realm was indeed somewhat lacking. What do you know? Realm? Don't judge the demon emperor's strength by his realm. Upon hearing that martialist's words, another martialist suddenly sneered. Before the demon emperor stepped into the life and death realm, his strength was already comparable to an ancestor. When he was in the immortal realm, he killed 2 emperors with his own hand. Do you still think that his realm is too low? It should be said that his current realm has already reached the heart-tempering realm. I'm afraid that he's even more terrifying than the last time he appeared. Life and death realm, comparable to an ancestor? An immortal realm cultivator killed an emperor? Upon hearing this warrior's words, many warriors in the surrounding crowd exclaimed in surprise. Such a thing would only happen in legends. Who would have thought that it would actually happen? An immortal realm cultivator could kill an emperor. The demon emperor's strength couldn't be judged by his realm. Let's see. This year's demon emperor does have the ability to compete for the top spot. Chapter 955. The demon emperor has broken through so many realms in just half a month. Chu Fengmian was a little surprised when he saw the demon emperor's realm. Compared to others, Chu Fengmian still had some understanding of the devil emperor. After all, Chu Fengmian had already fought with the devil emperor in the returning ruins heaven. At that time, the demon emperor was only at the 2nd step of the life and death steps, the immortal realm. In just half a month, the demon emperor had already reached the 6th step of the life and death steps, the refining heart realm. In half a month, he had broken through 4 realms. The demon emperor is indeed not simple. Chu Fengmian sneered. One of his goals in participating in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament was to spar with experts, especially the demon emperor. In the returning ruins sky, Chu Fengmian and the demon emperor had yet to decide a winner. Since that was the case, he would decide the winner in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament's arena. Time passed by slowly. After the demon emperor, no other martialists were as amazing as the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. In this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament, there were still some powerhouses that had suddenly appeared. Some of them were members of hidden families, while others were cultivators who had obtained great opportunities. Every time the 9 Regions Genius battle was held, there would always be some unfamiliar faces appearing. For most of the martialists present, this was no longer a surprise. Most of the martialists who came to watch the 9 Regions Genius Tournament wanted to see what kind of unfamiliar faces would appear in this year's 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Another 6 hours passed. The gate of the ancient gladiator arena suddenly closed, not allowing any martialists to enter. This meant that the 9 Regions Genius Tournament had officially begun. Boom! From the center of the ancient gladiator arena, a series of roars suddenly resounded. The entire arena underwent an earth-shattering change. A gigantic boulder emerged from the center of the arena. This rock was 12 meters tall, and there were partitions between every meter. The Heaven's Chosen Stone. Chu Fengmian was familiar with this rock. It was called the Heaven's Chosen Stone. This Heaven's Chosen Stone was enough to test a martial artist's aptitude. Just like in ancient times, when the major sects recruited disciples, they had to pass through the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Every Heaven's Chosen Stone was divided into 12 layers. Every additional layer lit up represented a higher qualification of the warrior. 1 is the lowest and 12 is the highest. In his previous life, Chu Fengmian had also tried the Heaven's Chosen Stone, but at that time, Chu Fengmian was simply a waste without any spirit energy. He didn't even have the qualifications to light up a single piece of it. This time, Chu Fengmian was looking forward to it. He wanted to see how many pieces he could light up this time. All martial artists, those who have been chosen, light up the Heaven's Chosen Stone in order. Taoist Jian Ke flew onto the stage and injected his spiritual energy into the largest Heaven's Choice Stone. Suddenly, all the Heaven's Chosen Stones emitted a dazzling light. Every seat in the ancient battle arena was by itself. Once a seat lit up, the cultivators sitting in front of it would enter the arena one by one. He walked in front of a heaven's chosen stone and lit it up. If he didn't go, it meant that he didn't want to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Every year, millions of martial artists participated in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. The Heaven's Chosen Stone was only the first test. If one couldn't pass the Heaven's Chosen Stone, they wouldn't even have the qualifications to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Daoist Jian, how many Heaven's Chosen Stones do we have to light up before we can participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament? A martial artist suddenly asked loudly. 4. Jian K's elder slowly opened his mouth and said, "Those who can light up 4 Heaven's Chosen Stones can officially participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament." 4. What? You can participate if you light up 4? Some of the martial artists who hadn't participated in the tournament disagreed when they heard Elder Jian K's words. There were a total of 12 Heaven's Chosen Stones. Lighting up 4 was only 1/3 of the way. However, some of the martial artists who had participated in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament for the first time stiffened when they heard the number. They didn't have much confidence in themselves. Is 4 very difficult? Chu Fengmian suddenly asked Gu Jin beside him. After all, this was his first time participating in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Although he had heard some rumors, he wasn't clear about some of the details. It's very difficult. Gu Jin nodded and said, "In the previous 9 Regions Genius Tournament, as long as a martial artist could light up 3 Heaven's Chosen Stones, they would be qualified to participate. This time, there's an extra Heaven's Chosen Stone. A cultivator who can light up 4 Heaven's Chosen Stones is enough to be considered a somewhat famous genius and qualified to join the 7 major sections. It seems that the number of cultivators who can truly participate this time is less than 1%. 1% is really cruel. Without strength, you won't even be qualified to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament." Chu Fengmian looked at the martial artists present and couldn't help but sigh. Among these millions of young martial artists, only 1% was qualified to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. As for the rest of the people, they could only sit below and watch quietly. However, the 9 Regions Genius Tournament was indeed a place where the strong preyed on the weak. Without strength, even if one forcefully participated in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, they would still die. Whoosh, whoosh. While Chu Fengmian and Gu Jin were conversing, some martial artists had already been called over and flew directly to the arena. They each chose a Heaven's Chosen Stone and poured their spiritual energy into it. Bang, bang. 2 stones, 2 stones, 3 stones, 2 stones. Of the dozens of people who went, not a single one lit up 4 Heaven's Chosen Stones. How is this possible? My aptitude is in the top 5 in the sect. How can I only light up 3 Heaven's Chosen Stones? A young martial artist looked at the Heaven's Chosen Stone in front of him and said in disbelief. He came from a small sect and had been nurtured as a genius since he was young. Now that he was participating in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, he didn't even qualify to participate. How could he accept this? The spectators were much calmer when it came to this matter. Every year, there would be some martial artists who came to participate in the 9 Regions Genius Tournament, but their morale would drop greatly and they would never recover. The 9 Regions Genius Tournament was so big that no one knew how many geniuses there were. Of course, there would also be some martial artists who came to the 9 Regions Genius Tournament and experienced the vastness of the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. Chapter 956. A figure landed on the stage and said disdainfully, "Today, I'll show you the difference between us." After saying that, the figure placed his hand on the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Thump, 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 the Heaven's Chosen Stones were lit up one by one. In the end, 6 of them were lit up. 6. Who is he? Which sect is he from? Many martial artists could not even light up 4 Heaven's Chosen Stones. The fact that 6 of them were lit up at once was enough to shock many martial artists. Even among the 7 great sects, his aptitude was not bad. He seems to be the top of the list of top 100 talents in the southern region, Mang Yun from the Black Sky sect. A martial artist suddenly remembered the identity of the person in front of him and said loudly, "The list of top 100 talents in the southern region? Isn't he a newcomer? A newcomer can light up 6 heaven's chosen stones. If a famous and fortunate expert from the 9 regions had such a result, it would be useless. Many cultivators would be astonished. However, Mang Yun was just a newcomer. Not bad. Looks like the Black Sky sect has a good seedling." Some warriors nodded in agreement. Mang Yun was a dark horse that had appeared out of nowhere. Many martial artists who were preparing to participate in the 9 regions genius battle remembered Mang Yun. Being able to light up 6 heaven's chosen stones was enough to make him a strong opponent. Go on. Go on. Immortal Jian Ke said slowly. Yes. Mang Yun left the stage and stood in a special area around the stage. This area was where only those who had passed the test and were qualified to participate in the 9 regions genius battle stood. The test continued. There were already quite a few warriors who had passed the test of the Heaven's Chosen Stone and stood to the side. Although the Heaven's Chosen Stone's test was difficult, the number of martial artists participating in the 9 regions genius tournament numbered in the millions. Even if 1 in 100 was chosen, there were at least tens of thousands of martial artists who could pass the test. Other than Mang Yun, there were also some new faces. They were all newcomers who were participating in the 9 regions genius battle for the first time. Is that the most outstanding 7th prince of the N dynasty? On the stage, a dazzling light shot up to the sky. A young man in luxurious clothes waved his hand and poured spiritual energy into the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Deng deng deng! From the Heaven's Chosen Stone, a dazzling light shot up to the sky. A total of 7 stones were lit up. It was even taller than the vast cloud from before. It's said that an outstanding 7th prince has appeared in the End dynasty. It must be him. He's only a newbie after lighting up 7 gems. That's too scary. I heard that he's only in his early 20s. In the future, he might even have the chance to occupy the top 10. In this year's competition, he will definitely be able to enter the top 500. In fact, he might even be qualified to fight for the top 100. As long as one was under 100 years old, one could participate in the 9 regions genius tournament. Therefore, if it were some newcomers, they would be able to fight their way into the top 500 or even the top 100 in the first batch. It was very likely that they would achieve very good results in the future. 7th Prince? Chu Fengmian looked at the 7th Prince. His eyes flickered as if he had used his spiritual consciousness to see through the 7th Prince's foundation. He's still hiding something. It seems that if he goes all out, he can light up 8 heaven's chosen stones. It seems that I can't underestimate the experts from the other regions. Chu Fengmian thought to himself. The 9 regions were so vast that there were indeed some never-before-seen geniuses. The 7th Prince was obviously one of them. The test continued. This wasn't the first time that a cultivator had participated in the 9 regions genius tournament. Their results weren't surprising. Most of them had 6 or 7 heavens chosen stones. Because many of them were famous geniuses in the 9 regions, their results didn't cause much of a stir. No one caught Chu Fengmian's attention. What Chu Fengmian really needed to pay attention to were the Demon Emperor, Jian Zhanxian, and the others. These were the strongest of the younger generation in the 9 regions. They were Chu Fengmian's true opponents. It's your turn. Time passed little by little. Gu Jin, who was sitting beside Chu Fengmian, suddenly glowed. It was her turn to participate in the test. Yes. Gu Jin nodded her head. With a move of her body, she leaped into the arena and landed on it. She pressed her hand tightly against the heaven's chosen stone, gathered her spiritual energy, and poured it into it. Thump! A dazzling light rose from the bottom. 5, 6, 7. Only when he reached the 7th level and was about to break through to the 8th level did the dazzling light slowly disappear. The 7th floor. Who is that? I've never seen her before. Is she a newcomer? She doesn't look like someone from the 7 great sects. Black Heaven sect? Firely sect? Or is she from that martial arts family? Some of the cultivators couldn't help but discuss Gu Jin's unfamiliar face. I remember now. She's the second daughter of the Gu family in Ning Province's ancient city, Gu Jin. Gu Jin. I didn't expect her to be from the Gu family. The Gu family had some reputation in the 9 regions. However, their reputation wasn't in martial arts, but in business. The Gu family was considered one of the third-rate families in the 9 regions. This girl hasn't joined any sect yet. The 7 great sects will definitely take this opportunity to rope her in. Of course. With such a terrifying aptitude, she might be able to reach the top 10 of the 9 regions genius tournament if she's nurtured properly. Sitting below the stage, some of the sect elders were sizing up Gu Jin, and they wanted to rope him in. However, they couldn't enter the arena during the test. They could only wait for the 9 regions genius tournament to end before trying to rope her in. Moreover, Gu Jin's true strength could only be displayed in the following 9 regions genius tournament. 7th floor. Not bad. Chu Fengmian nodded after seeing Gu Jin's result. It seemed that he didn't train Gu Jin for nothing. The 7th floor of the Heaven's Chosen Stone was a dazzling result in the 9 regions genius tournament. It was almost certain that she would be able to reach the heavenly mandate realm and become an emperor. Time passed bit by bit. The crowd's interest didn't decrease. Instead, they became more and more excited as the number of remaining cultivators decreased. True geniuses like Jian Zhanxian and Huang Wu hadn't made a move yet. Countless people were looking forward to seeing what kind of talent they would be tested for. Whoosh! Chapter 957. Jian Zhanxian's seat finally lit up. In an instant, Jian Zhanxian stepped into the arena like a sword. The warriors in the arena all stopped and looked in Jian Zhanxian's direction, their eyes full of anticipation. Jian Zhanxian pushed his palm into the Heaven's Chosen Stone and infused it with spiritual energy. The Heaven's Chosen Stone emitted a dazzling light that had never been seen before. The dazzling light rushed all the way to the 10th stone and slowly stopped. The 10th level. Seeing this result, many warriors sucked in a breath of cold air. Although many people had guessed that Jian Zhanxian's aptitude would be terrifying, they didn't expect him to reach the 10th level. There were only 12 levels in the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Anyone who could reach the 10th level was considered one of the most monstrous figures of an era. It's only the 10th level. Why are you so surprised? Seeing the surprise of the ordinary warriors, many of the disciples of the 7 major sects below curled their lips. The 10th level was indeed an unimaginable number for ordinary warriors. But for Jian Zhanxian, this result wasn't very good. The Heaven's Chosen Stone tested a warrior's aptitude. In terms of aptitude, Jian Zhanxian wasn't the best. Jian Zhanxian's strength came from his invincible swordsmanship and sharp sword intent. He was known as the Tianjian sect's once-in-a-thousand-years sword genius. It could be said that his true strength was even more terrifying than those tested by the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Starting from Jian Zhanxian, the geniuses of the 7 major sects all had their turns. The next person was Desolate Ancient Sect's Desolate Wu. Desolate Wu abruptly struck the Heaven's Chosen Stone with his palm. A dazzling light, even more dazzling than Jian Zhanxian's, shot into the sky. The 11th level. All the Heaven's Chosen Stones in front of Desolate Wu were lit up except for the most square one. This result was 1 level higher than Jian Zhanxian's. How terrifying! The last time Huang Wu participated in the 9 regions genius tournament, he was only at the 10th level. That was enough for him to make it into the top 3. Who would have thought that after such a long time, he would become even stronger? Some of the martial artists, who knew of Desolation's previous achievements, exclaimed in surprise. On the 11th floor. He was only a step away from the 12th floor. The 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone represented the peak of a martial artist's aptitude. Throughout history, there were very few cultivators who could reach the 12th level. It was hard to find one in 1,000 years. So. Desolate Void muttered to himself. He didn't reveal much joy on his face. To him, his goal was to reach the highest level, the 12th level. The result of the 11th floor was not enough to satisfy him. Gongsun Tianjue. Next was Gongsun Tianjue. He also placed his palm on the Heaven's Chosen Stone, causing the same dazzling light to resound. 10th floor. Gongsun Tianjue's results were the same as Jian Zhanxian's. However, the results of the Heaven's Chosen Stone did not represent a martial artist's strength. For example, Gongsun Tianjue had the Heaven's unique divine body. In terms of strength, he was far superior to other martial artists of the same level. In terms of aptitude, he was 10% lower than Desolate Void. However, in terms of true strength, the two of them were evenly matched. Between the two of them, either of them could defeat the other. Their strength was about the same. Jian Zhanxian was the same. He could make up for the difference in aptitude with his sword Dao. Soon, it was the turn of the remaining 9 regions' geniuses to take the test. Yao Zhe, 10th floor. Wu Hongtian, 11th floor. Xing Xianqing, 10th floor. Mo Lietian, 10th floor. These results were all at the top of the 9 regions' genius tournament. It could be said that if these people didn't really fight, no one would be able to determine who was the best. However, in this batch, other than these people, there was another anomaly. The gazes of countless people turned towards the Demon Emperor. This was MOD's first time participating in the 9 regions' genius tournament. Countless people were looking forward to seeing MOD's aptitude. Everyone was looking forward to this moment. A ray of light shot up to the sky from MOD's seat. In the blink of an eye, the Demon Emperor landed on the arena. Without any hesitation, MOD placed his palm on the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Immediately, a dazzling ray of light shot up to the sky. This ray of light was more dazzling than any other martial artist. Countless people's eyes were fixed on the Heaven's Chosen Stone. 9, 10, 11, this ray of light rushed to the 11th floor, but it still didn't stop. It even continued to rush to an even higher peak. 12. Boom! A deafening sound reverberated from the Heaven's Choice Stone. The entire Heaven's Chosen Stone shone with a dazzling golden light. 12 floors. All 12 floors of the Heaven's Chosen Stone have been lit up. This is too terrifying. What a terrifying aptitude. In the 9 regions, there hasn't been a martial artist who could light up all 12 Heaven's Chosen Stones for at least 1,000 years. Countless martial artists looked at the completely lit Heaven's Chosen Stone in front of MOD, dumbfounded. All 12 Heaven's Chosen Stones were lit up. This was something that only happened in legends. It was said that any martial artist who could light up all 12 Heaven's Chosen Stones was enough to stand at the top of the 9 regions. They were destined to rule the world in the future. Jian Zhanxian couldn't do it. Huang Wu couldn't do it. But now MOD did it. At that instant, almost everyone, including Sword Celestial and the others, were stunned. All hail the Sacred Lord! The mandate of heaven! The sovereign descends! All the disciples of the 6 Paths Demon Gate in the spectator stands shouted loudly. They followed the Demon Emperor and saw the Demon Emperor crushing everything. They were all excited to the extreme. Terrifying. I can't believe MOD's aptitude is so terrifying. This person's strength hasn't reached the destiny realm and hasn't become an emperor. We might be able to defeat him. That's right. The 12 floors of the Heaven's Chosen Stone represent the sovereign descends. We have to kill him before he grows. Otherwise, none of us will be able to compete with him. Jian Zhanxian, Huang Wu, and the others' eyes were filled with murderous intent. They were the top geniuses of the 9 regions. Naturally, they weren't willing to be trampled underfoot. The heaven's chosen stone represented aptitude. Mod was too young. He hadn't reached the destiny realm and hadn't become an emperor. For them, there was a chance that they could kill Mod. The demon emperor glanced at the heaven's chosen stone with a satisfied look in his eyes. Then, he slowly descended from the arena. It wasn't until Mod left that the crowd slowly regained their senses. They were extremely excited. Chapter 958. The 12th level. As expected, the demon emperor is my greatest opponent. Asterisk. He had heard of the legend of the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone. The heaven's chosen stone was chosen by the heavens. Being able to light up all 12 levels of the heaven's chosen stone meant that one had inherited the will of the heavens. One would definitely rule the world in the future. This rumor was a little exaggerated. However, those who could really reach the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone were all rare geniuses. Rising Sword slaying immortals, Desolate Void, and the others were all a level higher. As long as they didn't die prematurely, they would definitely become unparalleled experts in the future. It is said that in every era, only one person can reach the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone. I wonder if I can break it today. Chu Fengmian looked at the heaven's chosen stone in the arena and muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with eagerness to give it a try. In terms of aptitude, Chu Fengmian didn't think he was worse than anyone else. In terms of spiritual veins, Chu Fengmian didn't have spiritual veins, but divine veins. It was said that in every era, there was only one person who could rule the world. However, Chu Fengmian felt that he was worse than the demon emperor. He, Chu Fengmian, was a person who defied common sense. He had lived 2 lives, condensed the divine veins, and condensed the divine body of ice and fire. He had done too many things that others couldn't. At this time, Chu Fengmian's seat finally lit up. It's my turn. Chu Fengmian's figure flashed and landed on the arena in an instant. There were about 100 heaven's chosen stones in the arena. Chu Fengmian walked toward the nearest one. At this time, another figure landed from the stands and directly stood in front of Chu Fengmian. Boy, get out of here. Don't waste time here. This figure suddenly stood in front of Chu Fengmian and said disdainfully. This was a young man with a huge sword on his back. He was obviously a disciple of the Tianjian sect. He glanced at Chu Fengmian with a cold arrogance in his eyes, as if he was giving an order. I'm talking to you. Don't you understand? Get out of here, lest you interfere with my test. Chu Fengmian glanced at the Tianjian sect disciple. Chu Fengmian had seen a lot of arrogant people, but this Tianjian sect disciple was obviously more arrogant than most of the people he had met. However, this person did have the qualifications to be arrogant. Chu Fengmian looked over. The young man was around 30 years old, but he had already reached the destiny state and became a ruler. Among the countless geniuses in the 9 regions, a 30-year-old ruler could be considered the most monstrous. He did have the right to be arrogant. Unfortunately, none of this was a reason to be arrogant in front of Chu Fengmian. I've seen a lot of arrogant people, but you're the first one who's so brainless. Chu Fengmian looked at the Tianjian sect disciple and suddenly changed the topic. Kid, what do you think of our bet? Let's bet on the heaven's chosen stone. If your talent is higher than mine, my life is yours. You can kill me or cut me up as you wish. Of course, if my talent is higher than yours, your life is also mine. Do you dare to bet on this? As soon as Chu Fengmian's voice fell, countless eyes looked over. When these martial artists saw the Tianjian sect disciple in front of Chu Fengmian, they all looked at Chu Fengmian with miserable eyes. This kid actually wants to bet with Song Yao? Is this guy crazy? Bet on his life? Is he simply courting death? It seems that this is a hothead. He doesn't even know Song Yao's identity, yet he still dares to bet. Song Yao is the youngest ruler in the Tianjian sect. Betting on the heaven's chosen stone with Song Yao? He's simply courting death. Sounds of discussion could be heard. They looked at Chu Fengmian as if he were a dead man. In their opinion, Chu Fengmian was indeed too impulsive. It was just to snatch a heaven's chosen stone, so there was no need to fall out with him. Saying such words now was simply forcing himself into a dead end. What? You want to bet with me? Bet on the heaven's chosen stone? When Song Yao heard Chu Fengmian's words, he laughed loudly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Ha 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 ha, a piece of trash dares to bet with me? Kid, it seems that you don't even know my identity. Since you are ignorant, kneel on the ground and kowtow to me 3 times. Then, today's matter can be considered over. Who is this kid? How dare he provoke Song Yao? Is he courting death? This kind of kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth appears every year. But since he provoked Song Yao, it can only be considered his bad luck. The martial artists in the stands also looked at Chu Fengmian as if they were looking at an idiot. Song Yao's aptitude was enough to be called the top among martial artists in their 50s. This was his first time participating in Song Yao's competition. Everyone already had high hopes for him. At the very least, he had the aptitude to light up the 7th or even the 8th level. As for Chu Fengmian, he was simply a nobody. Many people had never seen Chu Fengmian before. The result was obvious. Identity? You're just a Tianjin sect disciple. Who cares about your identity? Chu Fengmian heard the crowd's discussion and sneered. If you don't dare, then forget it. Are the people of the Tianjin sect a bunch of cowards? Chu Fengmian's voice was deliberately loud. Not only the entire arena, but even the martial artists in the stands heard it clearly. Kid, are you courting death? Song Yao's smile suddenly stopped and his face darkened. Very well, I've already given you a chance. Since you don't know how to cherish it, then you can go to hell. I'll bet with you. Kid, watch carefully. Prepare to kill yourself. Song Yao looked at Chu Fengmian with disdain and bombarded the heaven's chosen stone with his palm. Immediately, the heaven's chosen stone shone with a dazzling light. This light only stopped when it reached the 9th heaven's chosen stone. The 9th level. Song Yao's aptitude actually reached the 9th level. This result caused a wave of exclamations. This was Song Yao's first time participating in the 9 Regions Genius competition. He could use the Heaven's Chosen Stone to stay at the 9th level. This was extremely shocking. One had to know that Jian Zhanxian's first time had only reached the 8th level. Humph, kid, it's your turn. It's not too late to admit defeat. I can still leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, when you fall into my hands, I'll let you know what pain is. Song Yao looked at Chu Fengmian and sneered. The 9th level. This number was weaker than Jian Zhanxian's. In this 9 Regions Genius competition, this number was close to the top 10. Chapter 959. Oh? After being so arrogant for so long, you're only at the 9th level? I thought you could reach the 12th level. Your arrogance knows no bounds. Chu Fengmian said disdainfully as he watched the 9th level left by Song Yao gradually extinguish. Only the 9th level? Then let me see how many levels you can reach. Song Yao laughed at Chu Fengmian's words. From his point of view, Chu Fengmian was just putting up a strong front. Hurry up, a piece of trash. Let's see how arrogant you can be. Is that so? Chu Fengmian sneered. He moved his feet and slowly walked to the Heaven's Choice Stone. Then, he slapped it with his palm. The Heaven's Choice Stone had a unique devouring ability. When Chu Fengmian's palm landed on it, all of his spiritual energy was mobilized and poured into the stone. Thump, thump, thump. The Heaven's Choice Stone devoured spiritual energy. The dazzling golden light began to climb crazily. The speed of the climb was simply too fast for people to see clearly. In an instant, all 12 Heaven's Choice stones lit up at the same time. Boom! A dull sound was emitted from the Heaven's Choice Stone. This sound was exactly the same as when the Demon Emperor reached the 12th level. The warriors in the stands originally wanted to see Chu Fengmian make a fool of himself. However, The scene in front of them made their eyeballs almost fall out. The 12th level. Another 12th level. Impossible. Is the Heaven's Choice Stone broken? Looking at the scene in front of them, countless warriors were somewhat in disbelief. The 12th level of the Heaven's Choice Stone was a rare occurrence in the legendary land. Although it was shocking that the Demon Emperor could detect the 12th level of the Heaven's Choice Stone, it was still acceptable. After all, that was the Demon Emperor, known as the peerless genius who revived the Demon Tao. Even if Jian Zhanxian and the others suddenly reached the 12th level, it would not be too surprising. However, Chu Fengmian was a newcomer who they had never seen before. In the entire ancient gladiator arena, only a few people had seen Chu Fengmian. Even the people from the 7 major sects might not know that Chu Fengmian was the person who killed countless of their disciples. This is impossible. Song Yao stared at the Heaven's Chosen Stone with wide eyes. Then, he closed his eyes and shook his head. But when he opened his eyes again, all he saw were 12 lit-up Heaven's Chosen Stones. Even the dazzling light of the Heaven's Chosen Stone did not dissipate. Instead, it became even more dazzling. It hasn't ended yet? What's going on? Why isn't it over yet? The results of the Heaven's Chosen Stone only lasted for 5 seconds before disappearing. But now, the Heaven's Chosen Stone was still emitting a dazzling golden light. In fact, this golden light was even brighter than before. Crack! A slight cracking sound was inadvertently heard. Only Chu Fengmian, who was closest to him, could hear his voice. In the face of Chu Fengmian's power, the Heaven's Chosen Stone actually began to crack. Not good! Chu Fengmian was shocked. He didn't expect the Heaven's Chosen Stone to be unable to withstand Chu Fengmian's power. A crack had already appeared on it. If this continues, the Heaven's Chosen Stone will shatter. With a thought, Chu Fengmian withdrew all of his spiritual power. The Heaven's Chosen Stone gradually calmed down. This time, the way everyone looked at Chu Fengmian changed. Chu Fengmian dared to bet with Song Yao. This was not stupidity, but confidence. Absolute confidence. Even if Chu Fengmian gambled with Jian Zhanxian and the others, he would still win the 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone. No, impossible. There must be something wrong with the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Song Yao was still muttering to himself when the light of the Heaven's Chosen Stone disappeared. He refused to believe it. Boy, you must have cheated. There can only be one person with the 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone in an era. There can't be 2 people. Song Yao looked at Chu Fengmian and suddenly recalled an ancient rumor. He roared loudly. How can a little guy in the god martial realm have such terrifying aptitude? I know, you must have known there was something wrong with the Heaven's Chosen Stone, so you deliberately cheated to bet with me. Elder Jian Ke, this boy cheated. Quick, he violated the rules. Kill him! Song Yao shouted loudly. The dazzling light of the 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone shocked enlightened Jian Quebet. His figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. His eyes flickered as if he was thinking about something. The Heaven's Chosen Stone was passed down from the ancient gladiator arena from ancient times. It might have been damaged after hundreds of thousands of years. Enlightened Jian Ke pondered for a moment and said, he was not too careful. Chu Fengmian actually had enough aptitude to reach the 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone. Enlightened Jian Ke wasn't the only one. Everyone else had the same thought. They were somewhat skeptical. Especially according to the legend, there could only be one person with the 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone in an era. According to the legend, it was impossible for 2 people with the 12th level of the Heaven's Chosen Stone to appear in an era. Damaged? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but laugh when he heard enlightened Jian Ke's words. The expert who built the ancient gladiator arena was probably someone who stood at the peak of the 9 regions. How could the Heaven's Chosen Stone be damaged? Boy, do you dare to try again? Song Yao seemed to have grasped at a life-saving straw as he looked at Chu Fengmian and shouted coldly. If you really have the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone, then try again. It's impossible for a piece of trash, who came out of nowhere to light up the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone. Why wouldn't I dare to light it up again? However, your life is now mine. You don't have the right to bet with me. Chu Fengmian looked at Song Yao and sneered. How about this? I'll give you another chance. Take out a sword totem and I'll bet with you again. If I can't light up the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone, my life will still belong to you. Do you dare to accept this bet? Sword totem. Song Yao was stunned when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. The sword totem was the most precious treasure for a sword cultivator. There were only 19 totems in the world, and each one recorded the most ancient sword technique. All the sword techniques in the world were derived from the records of the sword totem. The significance of a sword totem to a sword cultivator was no less than that of an extreme immortal weapon. Its value was extraordinary. Even Song Yao didn't have such a treasure. What, you don't accept? I've already given you a chance. If you don't accept, then I'll take your life. Chu Fengmian looked at Song Yao and said coldly. Song Yao, bet with him. Chapter 960. Countless people looked in the direction of the voice. The person who spoke was Jian Zhanxian. Apparently, even Jian Zhanxian didn't believe that Chu Fengmian had the aptitude for the 12th layer of the heaven's chosen stone. A wooden totem as tall as a person flew out from Jian Zhanxian's hand. It turned into a ray of light and suddenly flew over, landing in front of Chu Fengmian and Song Yao. A sword totem. At a glance, this wooden totem only had some ancient patterns. The swordsmanship recorded in this sword totem was obscure. Even most sword cultivators would find it difficult to comprehend even a little bit of it. Only sword cultivators who had reached the Emperor realm were qualified to comprehend a thing or two from this sword totem land. Once, the master of the sword Dao had 3 sword totems. However, with the fall of the master of the sword Dao, they should have fallen into the hands of the Tianjian sect. For Chu Fengmian, if he wanted to comprehend swordsmanship, the sword totem was the best choice. Chu Fengmian only wanted to make Song Yao pay the price for his arrogance. Since Song Yao wanted to go back on his word, Chu Fengmian didn't mind making the Tianjian sect pay a bigger price. Oh? The 19th totem? It's average, but it's still a sword totem. Chu Fengmian glanced at it and saw that this sword totem was the smallest of the 19. It was also the one with the least swordsmanship recorded. However, it was enough for Chu Fengmian. Boy, I'll bet with you. If you can't get the 12th layer of the heaven's chosen stone, I'll kill you. Song Yao looked at Chu Fengmian and roared ferociously. It was a coincidence that Chu Fengmian could get the 12th layer of the heaven's chosen stone by chance. He didn't believe that Chu Fengmian could succeed again. Then watch carefully. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a smile. He slowly walked to the other heaven's chosen stone and injected spiritual energy into it. All eyes in the ancient gladiator arena were fixed on Chu Fengmian. It was extremely quiet. They couldn't believe that Chu Fengmian could really light up the 12th layer of the heaven's chosen stone. However, the scene just now still stimulated their emotions. Everyone's gaze fell on the heaven's chosen stone in front of Chu Fengmian, waiting nervously. The heaven's choice stone also emitted a dazzling light. In the blink of an eye, all 12 layers of the heaven's choice stone were lit up. Boom! The dull sound once again came from the heaven's chosen stone. 12 levels! It's the 12th level again. The martial artists around the ancient fighting ring were all stunned. The heaven's chosen stone in front of Chu Fengmian emitted another 12 layers of light. In the capital of the 9 realms, it was hard to find a genius who could light up the 12th level of the heaven's chosen stone in 1,000 years. But today Chu Fengmian had actually done it. Under the astonished gazes of countless people, Chu Fengmian's figure slowly moved again. Chu Fengmian walked towards another heaven's chosen stone. What is he trying to do? Could it be that he wants to try again? Countless people stared at Chu Fengmian in silence. He watched as Chu Fengmian once again arrived in front of a heaven's chosen stone and injected spiritual energy into it. Boom! The dull sound once again came from the heaven's chosen stone in front of Chu Fengmian. All 12 layers of the heaven's chosen stone were lit up. 3 heaven's chosen stones had been lit up in a row. If there was only one stone, there might be a problem. But if there were 2 or 3 in a row, then there would definitely be no problem. There was no doubt that Chu Fengmian's aptitude was indeed the 12th level. I'm impossible. Song Yao stared blankly at the heaven's chosen stone being sized up. His face was already ashen. Every heaven's chosen stone that was lit up stimulated Song Yao. A person that he didn't put in his eyes was actually able to light up 12 heaven's chosen stones. This was something that he didn't even dare to dream of. How was it possible? This sword Dao totem is mine. Chu Fengmian couldn't be bothered with the dazed Song Yao. With a wave of his hand, he grabbed the sword Dao totem on the stage and put it into his empty ring. Spiritual Master Jian Kei's eyes flickered. When Chu Fengmian made his move, he almost stepped forward to stop him. The sword Dao totem was one of the most important treasures in the Tianjian sect. He couldn't bear to give it away. He couldn't wait to snatch it away from Chu Fengmian's hands. But this bet was made in the arena under the watchful eyes of the audience. If the Tianjian sect went back on their word, then the Tianjian sect would lose all credibility in the 9 regions. Many thanks. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a smile. Originally, he just wanted to teach Song Yao a lesson. But now, he had gained another sword Dao totem. With this sword Dao totem, Chu Fengmian's 9 regions sword technique could be improved. After Chu Fengmian retrieved the sword principal totem, he walked up to Song Yao and said calmly to Song Yao, "Kneel." Song Yao's expression was still a little sluggish. He only reacted when Chu Fengmian walked past him and heard his word. "What did you say?" "I told you to kneel. Your life is already mine. You'll do whatever I want you to do." Chu Fengmian looked at Song Yao and curled his lips. "What? The disciple of the Tianjian sect doesn't want to fulfill the bet? You!" Song Yao pointed at Chu Fengmian with a gloomy face. He originally thought that Chu Fengmian would leave after obtaining the sword Dao totem. He didn't expect that he would really have to fulfill the bet. Bet his life? Give his life to Chu Fengmian? Of course, Song Yao couldn't do that. Asking him to kneel under the watchful eyes of the audience was the greatest humiliation. As the youngest emperor of the Tianjian sect, it was impossible for him to kneel in front of Chu Fengmian. Song Yao's eyes revealed a hint of viciousness. He, an emperor, was forced to this point by a great ancestor. If they weren't in the arena, Song Yao would have attacked and killed Chu Fengmian. He didn't care about the bet. However, this was the ancient gladiator arena. In front of countless experts, he didn't dare to do so. "Young man, when it's possible to let people off, you should spare them. You've taken advantage of them, so don't push them too far." Spiritual Master Jian Kei, who was standing to the side, suddenly spoke slowly to ease the situation. "You've already obtained the sword Dao totem. You may leave." If Song Yao knelt today, it wouldn't just be Song Yao who lost face, but the entire Tianjian sect. Song Yao was the youngest emperor cultivated by the Tianjian sect. To a certain extent, he represented Song Yao's face. If Song Yao really knelt today, or even died at the hands of Chu Fengmian, the Tianjian sect would really lose face. Chapter 961. Perfected Jian Kei pondered for a moment and then spoke slowly. He believed that Chu Fengmian would know when to advance and when to retreat. He had already made himself clear. Knowing when to stop would be beneficial to everyone. He believed that Chu Fengmian would consider it carefully. If both sides took a step back today, the Tianjian sect wouldn't lose face. It would be fine as long as Chu Fengmian offered some compensation. It wasn't a big deal to offer some compensation to a supreme great ancestor. Compensation? Chu Fengmian suddenly laughed when he heard perfected Jian Kei's words. Compensation? Chu Fengmian's current wealth wasn't even comparable to that of a supreme great ancestor. Chu Fengmian didn't need any compensation. Moreover, he wasn't interested in negotiating with the Tianjian sect. Since Song Yao dared to provoke Chu Fengmian wanted nothing but his life. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a disdainful smile. In that case, the people of the Heavenly Sword sect intend to go back on their word? Chu Fengmian's words caused an uproar. How could the warriors present not understand the importance of Song Yao? He was the youngest supreme great ancestor of the Tianjian sect. If he really died at Chu Fengmian's hands today, it would be a joke. Since perfected Jian Kei had spoken, Chu Fengmian should also take a step back. Is this guy crazy? Does he really want to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Tianjian sect? Some of the warriors' expressions didn't change. They couldn't understand Chu Fengmian's actions. You want Song Yao's life? Sure, if the Tianjian sect offers me another sword principal totem, I can let him go. Chu Fengmian looked at perfected Jian Kei and sneered. Another sword principal totem? Perfected Jian Kei's face showed some anger when he heard Chu Fengmian's outrageous demand. Did he think that sword principal totems were cabbages? The Tianjian sect only had 8 sword principal totems. Now that they had lost one to Chu Fengmian, they only had 7 left. Offer another one in exchange for Song Yao? That was impossible. The value of a sword path totem was higher than that of a ruler. Young man, don't be greedy. If you're too greedy, be careful that you don't stuff yourself to death. Reverend Jian Kei sneered. This condition is absolutely impossible. Please change it. Really? I've already given you a condition. Since you don't want to accept it, I'll take this guy's life. Chu Fengmian completely ignored Reverend Jian Kei's threat. The Tianjian sect, as one of the 7 major sects, won't break the contract? Brat, I'm standing here today. Let's see what you can do to me. Song Yao suddenly roared. He had already made up his mind to break the agreement. No matter how important his face was, it was not as important as his own life. So what if Chu Fengmian's aptitude was high? No matter how high Chu Fengmian's aptitude was, he was only at the divine martial realm, a mere ancestor on the 5th step of the life and death step. Moreover, he was a ruler. Even if he broke his promise, what could Chu Fengmian do to him? Song Yao's words were met with boos from the audience. Perhaps everyone could guess that Song Yao would not obediently fulfill his promise. However, it was shameful for him to break his promise in front of everyone. However, Song Yao did not care at all. It was impossible for him to kneel in front of Chu Fengmian today. Break the contract? Is this how the Tianjian sect does things? Chu Fengmian looked at Reverend Jian Kei, who ignored him, and questioned him. Song Yao is no longer a disciple of the Tianjian sect. I've already expelled him. This matter is between the two of you. It has nothing to do with the Tianjian sect. Reverend Jian Kei calmly spoke from the side. There was a cold sneer in his eyes. Today he would first draw a line between himself and the Tianjian sect. In any case, he did not believe that Chu Fengmian had the ability to deal with Song Yao. Shameless. Some of the martial artists in the stands cursed in a low voice. At this time, Reverend Jian Kei suddenly said that he would expel Song Yao from the Tianjian sect. Wasn't it because he did not want Chu Fengmian to threaten the Tianjian sect? When the time came, even if Song Yao broke the contract, it would be his own action. It would have nothing to do with the Tianjian sect. Humph! Reverend Jian Kei coldly snorted when he heard the discussions. His cold snort silenced the discussions in the audience. No one was willing to provoke the anger of a supreme ancestor. I'll leave today's matter to you all. With that, Reverend Jian Kei retreated to the side, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Oh? So Song Yao is no longer a disciple of the Tianjian sect? That's good. I was worried that if I killed him in the arena, the Tianjian sect would interfere. Since this is the case, there's nothing to worry about. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a cold smile as he spoke casually. As he spoke, Chu Fengmian suddenly grabbed at Song Yao with his palm. Kill me? I'd like to see if you have the ability to do so. Song Yao said disdainfully when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. The difference between a supreme ancestor and an emperor was like the difference between heaven and earth. The moment Song Yao spoke, he gathered his spiritual power and drew his sword. The sword light burst out and pierced toward Chu Fengmian's chest. In for a penny, in for a pound. Since he had broken the contract, he might as well kill Chu Fengmian directly. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. A martial artist with a talent of the 12th layer of the heaven's chosen stone must not mature. Now was the best time to kill Chu Fengmian. Despicable! He actually wants to kill him at this time. The countless cultivators in the stands had already seen through Song Yao's thoughts, and they all cried out in surprise. Song Yao not only broke the contract, but now he wanted to kill Chu Fengmian directly. As the supervisor, Reverend Jian Ke turned his back to all of this, as if he didn't notice and didn't care. Young master, be careful. Seeing Song Yao suddenly draw his sword, Gu Jin hurriedly reminded him. However, her words were unnecessary. Chu Fengmian's palm suddenly grabbed at Song Yao's sword. The blade of Song Yao's hand was tightly grasped by Chu Fengmian. In the next moment, countless cracks appeared on Song Yao's sword, and it was forcefully crushed, just like that. What? This? How is this possible? Seeing Song Yao's sword being crushed by Chu Fengmian's hand, countless martial artists were shocked. They rubbed their eyes and couldn't believe what they were seeing. In the next moment, an even more unbelievable scene appeared. Chu Fengmian's spiritual power fell from his palm, and an enormous claw of a war dragon condensed in the sky and descended. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.